shift the agenda around?
He's not here yet.
Okay.
So we do still have item 5.1 prior to that.
Yeah. Okay, if he was here, I was just thinking 5.1 maybe a lengthy discussion, but maybe not.
Hey, so are we starting to live stream yet? Yes, the press is in. We're just we'll be ready to go at 1. Director Fall, Director Lennox won't be joining us today, and neither will his alternate.
Okay. So are we ready to go?
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the June the 7th, 2023 Finance Committee agenda. I'd like to call this meeting to order and start with a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation, as well as all Coast Salish First Nations on whose traditional territories we have the honor to live, including my home on Wai'ete, also known as Laskidi Island. We have before us an agenda. Are there any changes? Ms. Sturton?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. We just have one small amendment to make to item 8.6, and the 7th motion under that item. The change we are making is the 4th section of that, which is allocating funds from Area D Grants and Aid Service. The amount will change from $9,331.02, and the new amount will be $2,782.39.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And that's just a typo. So that will be when we deal with that item, and that'll make the change on the agenda. Are there any other changes anyone would like to propose? Seeing none, would someone like to move adoption of the agenda? I see Director Brander, Director Doubt. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. So, okay, so on to minutes. So minutes. First, the Finance Committee meeting, May the 3rd. Are there any changes or revisions anyone would like to make? And seeing none, would someone like to move adoption of the minutes? Director Elliott, Director Brander, any discussion? Seeing none, no. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Second is the minutes for the Finance Committee meeting, May the 17th, 2023. Are there any errors or omissions from that? Seeing none, would someone like to make the motion to adopt those minutes? Director Brander? I'll second it. And I'd just like to say, I'd like to thank my alternate director for being there. I was unable to attend. So I'll call the question, or sorry, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, it doesn't look like, so unanimous. Delegations and inquiries, we have none. So we move on to our unfinished business, and we have before us the Community Works Fund allocation, Canada Community Building Fund, Policy 3.12, postponed from the May 3rd meeting, Finance Committee meeting. And the proposed motion is, or the proposal is to discuss the Community Works Fund, Canada Community Building Fund, which is this new name, the policy, and direct staff for desired policy changes. So what's the wish of the, okay, Director McCormick?
Thank you. Chair, just a quick point here. Mr. Ringma is here with us under item 4.1. So I wonder if we're going to follow the agenda as printed, or we're going to vary that.
Okay, with unanimous consent, would the board be open to hearing from Mr. Ringma so he can use his time more efficiently? Okay, I don't see anyone opposed to that. So I think we'll move on. We'll deal with item 8.1 next, and then we'll come back to item 5.1 after that. Okay, so 8.1 in reports, BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement, presentation from Rob Ringma. Thank you, Mr. Ringma, for coming to us. And if you have a presentation, which I believe you do, I will hand it over to you, and the board can then ask questions if they so desire.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Board. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I will share my screen. And there we go. Can I just get confirmation that you can all see the slides in front of you there?
Goes up for me.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, glad to be here again to present a bit of a transit update and discuss our annual operating agreement as we do annually every year. Today, what I'll go through a quick ridership update, show you some provincial stats where we're at, as well as some local stats for the Cathett regional district and the rural paratransit system. We'll talk a little bit about the annual operating agreement. We'll talk a little bit about our transit improvement process, our expansion process, transit expansions, and then talk a little bit about our new electronic fare payment system that we're rolling out across the province. So in the province, across British Columbia, we're tracking quite well from COVID. Of course, what you see in this slide, you see that large decline with the red arrow of COVID and the impact it had on transit across the province in 2020. And then you see these successive kind of rebounds in ridership over on the right-hand side of the screen from 2020 to 2021 to 2022. And over here on the left in green, in the solid green, you'll see the 2023 numbers. So what you can observe is that across the province, we are averaging between 90 and 100%, and we've gone a couple weeks past when I produced this graph for this presentation, but we've been averaging between 90 and 100% of pre-COVID ridership levels. We do have a service disruption in the Fraser Valley right now, which has kind of brought transit operations there to a bit of a halt. So that's affected our numbers in the last couple months. But if we take those factors out, we are doing well, and we have been trending quite well across the province, which is great to see. And it's something we've been working towards from an agency perspective. If I look a little bit more granular at the rural paratransit system here, that's overseen by the regional district, you see very similar trends. So you can see in the top line, those were 2019 pre-COVID numbers. I actually removed 2020 just for making the graph a little bit easier to view. But what you can see is ridership returning in dropping in 2020, a little bit of a rebound in 2021. In 2022, we actually surpassed some of our 2019 numbers here in the summer. And 2023 has started out even higher than we started in 2022, with, again, some of our peaks actually exceeding pre-COVID ridership levels. So that's encouraging. You'll see when I get into the AOA that we're anticipating to see continued return of ridership and revenue in Powell River and in the rural paratransit system, which is a good thing. And this is very similar to the trends that we're seeing, as I mentioned, across the province. Just something else that I kind of put in this slide that's of note, you can really see that the summer months where that's kind of our peak ridership time. So it'll really be interesting to see when we get into the summer period how we're performing. But all indications right now are that the system has made a nice comeback, and there's some opportunity for us to continue to grow the service. Just to remind everybody, I like to throw in a couple slides just on the BC Transit model, and just to kind of talk a little bit about how the model works. The BC Transit model is a shared partnership between the province, BC Transit, and our local government partners in an effort to provide that transit services in the communities where we operate. The province, of course, on the left-hand side of this slide, they provide the provincial share of the funding. They provide kind of a high-level overall provincial transit policy and oversight. So they approve our business plan, our service plan each year. And then, of course, in the middle, BC Transit, we provide the planning, scheduling, marketing, the fleet assets, the management, the operational support, and the contract administration services for each system. Through that model, our local government partners achieve economies of scale because we're purchasing in bulk, we're managing the fleet across the province. We have all of those services in-house, so we can really glean some of those efficiencies. And then on the right-hand side, we have our local governments, and our local governments, they provide the local oversight. They set the local policies, routes, bus stops, and have the final say on any fare decisions within the local system. So it's a great formula that way. Everything always has to come through local government for final approval, which I think is prudent and a great example of how this system works. And lastly, of course, the local governments also provide their share of the municipal funding for the system, which I'll show you a bit in this next slide. So under that shared services model, we have a legislated funding formula through the BC Transit Act. The rural paratransit system is classified as a conventional transit system. So you'll see that the provincial share of the funding for that system is 46.69%, with the local government picking up the additional 53.31%. On the right-hand side, you'll see the custom handy dart. Now, of course, the regional district doesn't pay for the handy dart service. That's through the city of Powell River, but it does have a different funding formula, so it's always good to see what that is. But in both circumstances, all of the revenue that comes into the transit system comes back to local governments to help offset your costs. And then we do use some, if we can get any bus advertising or interior bus card advertising. We also, after we've covered our costs, we turn that portion of revenue back to local governments as well to help them offset those costs. And of course, if we take your share of costs, which is 53.31, we minus the revenue, we typically have a balance left over. And what the regional district and our local government partners will do is they will use property tax to help cover that other portion of those costs. So staying on kind of the budget idea and the cost side of things, I am today going to present some high-level annual operating agreement numbers. So our annual operating agreement is the annual budget that confirms the service to be delivered and the associated costs for transit in the regional district. It'll outline what BC Transit's commitment is in terms of share of costs, and it also outlines what the net municipal share of costs will be, so what your local government responsibilities are. In this AOA, we've looked at things such as ridership and revenue projections. We've adjusted some operational costs that I'll speak to a little bit on the next slide. The regional district did have some leftover federal and provincial safe restart funding that came as part of some of the COVID-19 support. We've had that kind of the last 2 years. And then whenever we do a special initiative, like implementing our Next Ride system, which is the automatic vehicle locators, or what we're about to roll out in terms of our new electronic fare system, those initiatives and the funding for those get shared between the local governments and BC Transit. So we're seeing a number of exciting and innovative projects underway currently, including battery electric bus. We're having the delivery of our first 10 battery electric buses into Victoria this summer, which is pretty exciting to see how that program is going to roll out across the province. So in terms of the numbers, the AOA, as I mentioned, outlines our transit service agreement with our local government partners. When a local government partner signs this agreement, they're agreeing to have BC Transit manage and operate the transit system in your community, and for the costs that we've estimated. This allows local governments to take advantage of those cost sharing and efficiencies that I'd mentioned are set out by the BC Transit Act and our funding formula. So very top line, total revenue, and what I've done here is I've compared last fiscal's budget to this fiscal's budget. What you'll see here is revenue. We've projected a fairly significant increase in revenue based on some of those ridership trends that we have been seeing. So we see that being up around $4,000 on the year. Total operating costs are a little bit higher. Looking at, actually, if I just go to total costs, $343,000 last year versus $374,000. Most of those cost increases are due to inflationary effects. So, we've kind of seen the price of everything, as everybody has, go up across the board. But fuel for sure was a large one. And when I dug a little bit deeper into the budget, it looks like the fuel costs have gone up almost 50%. And that is just a byproduct of two things. Number one, we tend to budget conservatively. When I say conservatively, we budget higher than maybe even what the current cost of fuel is to basically mitigate against any potential fuel cost increases over the year. So we're quite conservative in our budgeting. Previously we used to bill on budget, but now we actually bill on actual. So the regional district will only pay what we actually pay for from month to month and week to week. So total costs, as I mentioned, up slightly. The actual impact's almost about a 10% increase. But then you'll see that additional funding. So you see the Safe Restart funding applied at $10,000. So what we've done is we have exhausted the last stream of that Safe Restart funding, and that has a net effect of reducing your total share of cost, and that's only reducing the local share of cost. That doesn't reduce BC Transit share of cost because that's a local transit fund specifically for the regional district. So net, looking at the bottom two lines, you'll see that the actual net municipal share of cost, so that's the share of cost for the regional district, is at $152,000 for the year, which is only up about $1,000 on last year, so about 1%. And that's mainly due to that Safe Restart funding offsetting some of those cost increases. And then you see the BC Transit share of costs. So BC Transit will share in $194,000 of cost. And technically our share, because we don't have that Safe Restart funding that we can apply, our share of costs actually went up about 9.7%. So pretty happy to be able to present a budget that is only up 1% for the year. So we're pretty happy about that. So it's a good news story from my perspective. So just moving on to transit improvement process and our expansion process. So most of the board members around this table have seen this process and been through some of the annual reiterations. What we know is right now we start having conversations with local governments about the different, and their staff, about the different transit improvement options that are available. We then put those initiatives, we cost those initiatives, and we put them into a memorandum of understanding that we partner with the local government. So typically we plan those out anywhere from 1 to 3 years out in advance, because that then allows BC Transit to proceed with securing funding from the province for those expansion initiatives. And how do we get to those expansion priorities? We look at previously not implemented priorities. We review any of our planning documents or local plans. We look at local initiatives and priorities, and we also look at what other kind of capital and infrastructure pieces need to take place. And basically what we do, we come back to the local government in August and September with a fully costed plan. The local government signs off on that, and then across the province, we sum up all of those expansion requests, and we go to the province and ask for the additional funding that's required for those expansions. So if this board remembers, last year we had this TIPS expansion planning item, which is to add a bus into the service and provide additional service for the Route 13 to Texada Island. That had, and this is last year's costing, last year we costed that out at a total cost of $61,000, which would have meant an increase of about $35,000 to the transit budget for the regional district. Unfortunately, this year, the province did support our core budget, so the core services that we do provide, but they did not allocate expansion funding for this fiscal, so fiscal 2023-24 that we're in. So basically our mandate was to maintain our existing service levels, continue to grow that ridership to get it back to pre-COVID levels, and that they would revisit expansion initiatives in next fiscal. So I wanted to make sure this board was aware of that. I also want to let this board know that I will be working with your staff to come back, as I mentioned, at the end of the summer, kind of early fall, with a new proposal. Most likely, we will continue to advocate for the additional service and the additional bus to Texada, and then we will reapply for that expansion through the TIPS process with the province in the fall. Last slide for me, just wanted to get you up to speed on our electronic fare collection system. So we are rolling out a new fare collection technology across the province. This will replace some of our current on-bus technology that is being, let's face it, it's getting quite antiquated. This new system will definitely better meet the expectations of our riders and provide additional options for our riders in terms of how they can pay and the convenience of how they can pay. big disclaimer here, we still will take cash. We will always take cash. Cash is not going away. This is just going to provide additional options for people to access transit and access it in an easier fashion. So when we look at the initial rollout, it'll be a mobile app where you can actually tap your phone on a validator. We will have an opportunity for people to purchase a reloadable fare card, very similar to the Compass card that people will be familiar with in TransLink system. And then, of course, we'll install onboard validators on every bus. The second phase of the program, we hope, and I shouldn't say hope, it is in the plan in the second phase to move to the next level, which is to allow people just to tap with their debit card or their Visa card if they don't want to go with the mobile app or use a reloadable fare card. So phase 2 of that project, once we have all the validators installed and we've tested the system using the mobile app and the reloadable fare card, we'll move to that next phase. And I think that's going to be the real game changer in terms of access and accessibility. So we are rolling that out starting this summer. We will be doing pretty extensive customer and obviously operational engagement, but we will actually be coming to the Powder River region, trying to build and do some stakeholder engagements and some public engagements to help inform the public about the changes, about how to use the technology, and we have a pretty comprehensive program to support that. So we're not just going to drop the electronic fare collection bomb on the table and walk away. We're going to do our due diligence to make sure that the public's very aware of this program and the benefits that it'll provide. So that is the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions that anybody may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ringma. So we have, before us we have our recommended motion in the agenda, but first we can start with some questions. We have a few minutes if people want clarification before we move on to the motion for the operating agreement. Let me just see if I see Director Gisborne. Let me make
Director Elliott.
Director Elliott. Okay, I have to make the room big. You were small, so I couldn't see. Okay, Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. My question had to do with fuel and talking about it increasing by a lot. What is the amount that the transit system spends on fuel, and what would be the potential operating savings if we went to an electric system?
Great question, Director Elliott. Give me 1 second here. I think I can tell you what your total fuel costs are. So your total fuel costs in 2023-24 is projected to be $28,000. So it's a pretty, so that's the number that's in the budget right now. $28,000 is what you're spending on fuel. The electrification one is a really interesting question. So I'm just trying to think where to start on electrification. What I would put out there is that obviously when you move to electrification of your fleet, you are going to save on your fuel costs. But there are some other costs, non-fuel related, that you do incur. Charging infrastructure would be the first one that would come to mind. The actual cost of the buses is about double currently. Of course, technology is changing all the time. Efficiencies are getting better. So in the early stages of kind of rolling out electric buses or battery electric buses, there will be some upfront kind of fixed costs that will need to be accounted for. But of course, what we know is over the long term, after those fixed costs are set up and implemented, the fuel savings and potentially some carbon credits and some support from different levels of government will make that long run clearly a positive from a business case perspective.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Director Gisborne.
Sorry, I had one question, but now I actually have two after hearing Director Elliott's question. The electrification of buses. And this makes me think about in our communities, not however necessarily over 100 years ago, there was electric streetcars. They didn't require batteries; they used overhead wires. So I'm wondering, does BC Transit have any plans in the work or proposals to put in overhead wires in certain areas where it makes sense, so that we could do electrification without the need of having to buy these very expensive batteries? Technology, as I understand, is 100 years old. So I'm just wondering what BC Transit's plan is on that one.
Yeah, I can be a little bit direct to answer your question and then provide a little bit of additional information. So I would say, to answer your question, Director Gisborne, are we looking at overhead streetcar electrical infrastructure? The answer is no. We are going down the road of battery electric buses, which have batteries. But an interesting piece is there's two ways to charge those buses. Number one is to have in-facility charging stations set up where the buses can charge every evening when they go into the yard, and overnight charging. The next phase is what we call pantograph charging, which is actually setting up at exchanges or very frequented bus stops a overhead charging apparatus that actually would quick charge those buses as they go through the routes. So phase one of battery electric bus will rely mainly on in-facility charging because we can control that infrastructure. We can install that infrastructure fairly quickly. Obviously, having inline pantograph chargers takes a lot more collaboration and coordination with our local government partners and BC Hydro and various different groups in order to do that. So yeah, in terms of the streetcars and setting up that electrical infrastructure, I would argue that would also have a fairly significant cost impact to try to set that up. I think we've made the decision as an organization that battery electric buses is the direction we want to take, and we are, obviously working hard as an organization to find the most efficient and expedient way to get those buses up and running and on the road.
Okay. I guess I find that a little disappointing. Technology is, it's been around for a while. My second question is, one of the challenges a lot of our, isolated community have up here, like in Powell River and all up and down this coast, is our bus services, well, they connect us to ferry terminals, and ferry terminals aren't really in community centers. I see that, TransLink, they have a C-bus option. Has BC Transit looked into providing C-bus options and passenger-only water connections from community to community at all? Is that something that BC Transit is looking into?
That is not something that BC Transit is actively pursuing at this time. Of course, regionally here, the discussion and dialogue still continues about how to do a better job of providing seamless routes for customers, particularly from the Powell River Regional area to the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I believe the Sunshine Coast Regional District is looking at potentially even moving forward with a feasibility study, working with BC Transit in not necessarily next fiscal, but the fiscal following. So I think there's still discussion and dialogue happening about how we can expand our transit system to help kind of increase some of those regional connections. Right now, we have I would say a good system in terms of us providing service to Sultry Bay, coordinated with the Sunshine Coast Connector, to provide an option for people to get from Powell River, even from Lund, all the way to Langdale and on to Vancouver. But I think everybody would agree that there's room for improvement and an appetite for improvement of that type of system to try to provide a more consistent and steady system. And of course, BC Transit would be willing to work with any of our local government partners that continue to want to explore those options.
Okay, so to understand the answer, BC Transit is still focusing on the highway infrastructure and the bottleneck of BC ferries at Sultry Bay and Langdale.
That would be a correct assumption, yes.
Okay, also disappointing. No further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other burning questions, Director Brander?
Mine's a quick one. Thanks, Chair. Just to Mr. Ringma, I know that the Island Coast Economic Trust, known as ICE-T, is doing a study, a transportation study, and there's going to be one of these occurring in Powell River, and I was just wondering if anybody from BC Transit was planning on attending.
Yeah, anytime there's any sort of transportation planning going on in any region, I would very happily put my hand up to be involved as a key stakeholder. I have not heard yet of that ICE-T particular initiative, but I would love if staff could coordinate with me afterwards and potentially make sure that we have someone from our planning department attend any of those types of meetings, because it's important. Transit is an important part of the transportation infrastructure, and we want to make sure that when those types of dialogues are happening, that people fully understand the capabilities of the transit system and what options we do have available.
Okay, great. Thanks. I think the people from ICE-T are planning on getting in touch with you, but I will confirm with them. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment to Director Gisborne's question. Many lifetimes ago, I was the PR person for the Vancouver transit system. And it was noted, I remember from those days, that a lot of people complained about the overhead trolley wires. They're unsightly. And if you need to make a slight change in a route, then it involves some major work involving poles and wires and all of that. So the battery powered technology gives much more flexibility to operate the system than the overhead trolley wires do. So that's just a quick comment. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Ringma. You're welcome to stay on and watch our next piece here. So we're going to debate now the operating agreement. Thank you for presentation. That was very good. So we have before us a recommendation that the board authorized the required BC Transit annual operating agreement be signed. What's the wishes of the board? Director Gisborne, move that. Is there a seconder? Okay, Director Elliott. So is there any discussion on that operating agreement? And I can't see Director
Elliott has her hand up.
Director Elliott.
Thank you, Andrew. I think I'll put my hand out in front now because I can see that.
No, I was just trying to find Director McCormick's went missing on my screen. So
I just wanted to verify that everything in the agreement is all part of our operating budget and it doesn't deviate from what we've already allocated. I guess that would be our finance person.
Finance or Mr. Devereaux. I see. All right, it's Mr. Cohenhoven. He's there putting his hand up.
Thank you through the chair. Confirm, yes, the overall cost of the transit for this year is right on par with what we had budgeted.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Ringma. Thank you, staff, for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Chair and Board. Have a great day.
Okay, so now we'll go back to unfinished business, item 5.1, Community Works Fund. Before we go into this, I would just like to thank staff for the extensive work on this, as well as the whole agenda. The financial staff really did a Herculean effort to bring forward an agenda that's 700 pages long. So I hope we can be efficient in our discussions and move through our big items efficiently. This item is the Community Works Fund allocation, now called Canada Community Building Fund, Policy 3.12, which was postponed from our May meeting. And really is just for us to discuss and propose options. And it was brought forward by Director McCormick, and I believe she had her hand up earlier. So Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you to the board for postponing it so that I could be here to speak to this issue. So I've had 9 years to think about this. And the issue keeps pulling at me because I truly believe that an allocation process which puts importance on the needs of our rural communities, like other regional districts do, is the right way to go. I believe that we can do better to meet the needs of our electoral areas. Policy 3.12 was put in place for the Community Works, now Community Building Funding Program, which runs from 2014 to 2024. And in the past, we made the decision under Section 4 of the policy guidelines to allocate these funds, and I quote, first and foremost, for the QRD's own corporate financial challenges. And while that seems fair, I believe this policy is unfair to rural areas, and I will explain why. By spreading the funds region-wide, the city benefits as well as our electoral areas. Sounds like it's fair, but not really. The city gets its own allotment of community building funds. And by also benefiting from our allotment, city taxpayers are getting the benefit of 2 shares of community building funds, while electoral areas don't even get the full share of 1. What we do now benefits the city twice while neglecting the needs of our rural communities. It's no wonder that as this funding stream has rolled out, most other regional districts, like the ones included in the staff report, do things differently. Common practice among most regional districts is to allocate community building funds directly to electoral areas for projects which qualify under the criteria for these grants. Some give 100% to electoral areas, while others split the money between EAs and corporate needs. As such, I don't believe we as a board are providing the best or the right direction we can for the allocation of these funds. It's been stated that if we allocate community building funds directly to EAs, that large balances could accumulate before enough money is amassed to do a particular project. But that's exactly what's happening now, with an unallocated balance of nearly 1.4 million in this account. And even with this large pool of unallocated funds, we still turn down an improvement district's request for 60,000 toward their water system upgrade. Why? Because it wasn't a corporate or regional-wide project. I believe it's time to put our communities into the way we allocate community building funds. It's time to give our rural areas access to funds for community building projects which qualify under the criteria, but are otherwise unavailable to them. And if electoral areas don't need the money for a particular project, it's also common practice to make the funds available for other initiatives. So how would we do this? Well, looking at the variables in the staff report, and I agree it's very extensive, and thank you for that. A good place to start is with the allocation of a base amount to electoral areas with increments for population and the number of services the regional district operates in each area. And to not lose sight of our corporate needs, I believe a formula should also allocate 70% to electoral areas with the balance for corporate projects. It's time to stop neglecting the needs of our rural communities, while the city in fact benefits twice. I do have a motion, Chair, to put forward at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick. So perhaps because I think other directors may want to have some introductory comments. Maybe we'll go around the room once and then come back to Director McCormick with the motion or any other motion that might follow on from that. So I see Director Gisborne.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead. It's your turn.
Thank you, Chair Paul. Community Works Funds allocation. This is something that's very dear to my heart. It's something I've thought a lot about, and I'm very thankful for Director McCormick for bringing this item before the board and being quite persistent on making sure we address the issues with the Community Works Funds policy. Many years ago, before I ran for office, I didn't really know what Community Works Funds was, but out in Paradise Valley, we got a bike lane. And the story I heard was, well, we got this active transportation line and it was done without burdening the local taxpayer. And I didn't really understand how that came to be. It was then explained that 50% of that active transportation came from the Ministry of Transportation through a grant, and the other 50% came from Community Works Funds. There was some challenge at the time to try and figure out, how can we use these Community Works Funds to benefit the electoral area? It ended up funneling its way through the Regional Park Service, which is a service that's shared for by everyone. But the benefit came for the electoral areas, the rural residents. And I really echo Director McCormick's statement that Community Works Funds that come to the regional district is based on the electoral area population. That's where we need to be putting our focus. If we're using Community Works Funds for a shared service like the Resource Recovery Center, or, you know, even if it's regional parks, which in the case of Paget Road was, we still need to make sure that the focus is on the electoral areas. The Resource Recovery Center is, well, center of town. So I am absolutely in favor of changing this policy, but we also got to make sure that we don't want to necessarily say, okay, it can only go to electoral area services or improvement districts, but we want to make sure that there is the focus on benefiting of the electoral area residents, which is what this money is for. And when it was explained to me, and I believe it was Colin Palmer maybe, or possibly Stan, or both, that the discussion of how Community Works funds was spent was discussed at the Rural Services Committee. The staff report is very in-depth, very thorough, and big thanks to Manager of Financial Services, Linda Green, and all her staff for compiling it. And I noticed that I don't see any other regional districts having a Rural Services Committee, but they do have Electoral Area Services Committee, which does essentially the same thing. And I think if we are going to change this policy, which I'm fully in support of changing the policy, I think we should have it in the policy that Community Works funds should be discussed, at least at their initial step, by the Electoral Area Services Committee, so that we can focus on the needs of the electoral area services. And then we can start the ball rolling to find out which of our regional district siloed services would best fit. And it might be something that is, you know, only in Lund or only on Texada. It might be something that we can get it through regional parks. So for example, a active transportation corridor on Texada, we might be able to make that work through regional parks. But there also might be cases where it's not a regional district service. It might be an improvement district that we're looking to support, but we need to have that focus of the electoral areas. That's at the heart of Community Works funds. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm curious to see and hear what the other directors have to say. And another big thank you to Director McCormick for your persistence on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. Is there Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. I'm a little confused, I guess, as to what these preambles are about, because I don't know if we're into debate. We don't have a motion as of yet, but I mean, I guess I'll make a few comments with the idea that I will be able to comment later on when we actually have a motion, but I have a problem supporting the concept of individual accounts for individual electoral areas. I don't really see there being much point in it. I can understand where somebody might make an argument that you would have separate pools for region-wide issues and a separate pool for maybe electoral area issues, but electoral area directors don't rule the area that they're in. They don't rule it in the sense that they don't get to make the decisions. The money that is allocated to, say, Area C, I don't get to just decide how that's spent. I still have to get approval by everybody on the board. And that's no different than it is now. As far as I know, there's nothing stopping directors from putting forth proposals for money to be spent in their areas, which would require board approval now. So putting it into each individual area doesn't make much sense to me, because now you got to save up for a long period of time for an area that has a small population. Or the argument was made, I believe that, or not the argument, but it was stated in Director McCormick's opening or preamble that the number of services that electoral area should have an influence on how much they receive. I don't agree with that either, because that just means that the residents of that area have decided what services that they want, but now it would be expecting the rest of the regional district to help pay for them. That doesn't seem fair to me either, but I'm just going to stop there until we go further, and then maybe I'll have more comments to make. Thanks.
Thank you. I have some comments. I'll defer until the other director. I see Director Elliott, but just to explain the process, because the staff put forward a recommendation for the committee to discuss the Community Works Fund. I think there's a balance between, wide open discussion and kind of narrow. And I'm trying to facilitate a narrow discussion of, one opportunity around the table, and then, then a motion could be put on, and at least we are informed about the options, because there's so many different levers. So Director Elliott, then Director Dowd, and then I'll speak. So Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair Fall. I just wanted to speak briefly about the idea that the city's benefiting twice, because most of the projects put forward are not necessarily city benefiting projects that are currently funded. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but that's not really what's happening. In general, I think the most flexible way of handling the money is probably the best way, where projects in areas that are eligible are open to being planned for in the future. But if you choose to spend the money on something that's not necessarily equitable this year, you can still do that as a board. You can decide to do that. So I don't think setting it up so that it precludes flexibility is in the best interests of the region. So that's my comment on that. And then I also wanted to point out there are many areas where the city bears the brunt of the expenses and also shares the benefits. The community forest is a community forest owned by the city, and yet the entire region benefits from it. So I don't think we want to get too territorial when we're looking at how do we service our region. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Director Elliott. And Director Dowd.
Yeah, and this discussion, and it's hard to keep it into a limited discussion. We're talking about a very far-reaching set of ideas. What the proposal is generally, and Director McCormick has laid out quite a few details in what she plans to say. I'm not going to address all of those. Is limiting the use of the Community Works Fund to being used for projects that specifically benefit an individual electoral area. Director Gisborne has expanded that and saying they might use funds that are contributed by the regional district's taxpayers who live in the city to support those projects that benefit a specific regional area, electoral area. That's, in my view, is not particularly fair to the taxpayer in the municipality who contributes to a regional service expecting it will benefit the entire region rather than one specific area. So I think leaving the options open in the Community Works Fund so they can have a clear discussion would have less of a negative impact. And to let people know what I'm going to be making my decisions on is, as I sit here, the reason I exist here as a director of the regional district is to represent the taxpayers who pay taxes to the regional district who live in the municipality. I don't represent the city of Powell River. I represent the people who pay taxes to the regional district. And I will vote in favor of what I think is in the best interest of those taxpayers. And that is, we'll see. That's how I'm going to participate in the debate when we get a motion on the floor and we can actually talk in detail about what's being proposed.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. So Director Gisborne, maybe we should try to avoid going, because if I recognize you and I want to speak myself, then we go into a second round. And I think that extends what we're trying to do. I'd rather get a motion on the table if that's okay, and then comments. So I just have 4 short things to say about this. One is there is no rush to finalize this today. I look forward to seeing a motion on the table. We've heard from the directors the different viewpoints. Ideally, we can move this forward a bit and give staff some direction to maybe bring something back to us. The 3 items I've heard 2 of these items, and one of them is something I'll put forth. One is the idea of flexibility. So, we talked about, flexibility and not, some directors have said that they don't want to reduce that flexibility. So either to divide the funds up into little pots, by EA, or to put too much rigidity into the system so that we can't fund things. And I think that's an important topic. Another important topic is equity, and we've heard equity related to city versus rural, but also rural equity in terms of the per capita funding. I think that's a piece of it. And another piece that I'll throw in there is the difference between having a hard objective, for example, a certain percentage allocation for rural areas versus a target or a kind of goal that might be used and monitored over time. So leaving flexibility and yet having a goal that can be rebalanced and assessed at the political level over time. So those are the comments I have. I think I'll leave it there and look forward to a motion being put forward. Which I think Director McCormick had a motion, but
I got a motion.
Well, Director McCormick mentioned she had a motion, so I'll recognize her for that.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe our corporate officer has a copy of the wording, if it's possible to share. That the committee recommend the board, starting in 2024, allocate community building funds 30% for corporate needs and 70% for electoral areas with an EA formula of a base amount plus increments for population and the number of RD services available in each area. And that's what I would move, Chair.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? And I can't see the board. Let me, let's try to, I can't see the board. Okay, there. Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, I'll second it for discussion. So we have the motion, which has the 30/70 and some other elements to it related to RD services. So who would like to speak to it? Director McCormick?
Thank you, Chair. I can be flexible on the numbers, on the 30/70 or whatever the split should be, but I think it's important that we do allocate funds directly to rural areas so that there is a benefit for areas that don't have any access to any other funding. And I think we need to recognize that, as most other regional districts do. And so that is the reason that I'm bringing this forward. I'm putting this motion on the table. And I've already said most of what I need to say during the preamble, so I will listen now to what others have to say. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe I saw, was that Director Elliott with her hand up? Putting it right in my, so I can see in my field of view. Director Elliott, floor is yours.
So I just mainly had a question. So the intention is 30% is kind of pooled and 70% is a hard sort of distribution to electoral areas based on population, and it can't be spent anywhere else. Is that the intention?
Yes.
Director McCormick said, so it'd be, you're talking to hard.
Yes, and that's how most other regional districts do it.
Okay, is there, I can't see the room. Could it maybe, Director Gisborne? Okay, thank you, Corporate Officer.
Yeah.
Director Gisborne?
Yeah, oh, thanks. The motion has me a little confused. I understand where it's going. I had originally thought that our motion was, we did have a motion on the floor, which is the one in the agenda. So was that motion not moved or seconded? The one that's in the agenda?
The motion, just for clarity, the motion in the agenda, even though it is a motion, doesn't have any action to it. It's actually open-ended. It says direct staff. So I read that to mean that we need to actually put forward a motion that gives action for staff to act on. There's nothing in the motion in the agenda for staff to act on without direction.
Okay. I'd like to clear some things up because I think there's been some confusion about, equity between municipal voters and electoral area voters. The federal government gives out money, which is called community works. Money is given per capita to municipalities. And then also money is given to regional districts per capita, but only for the electoral areas. So it's like the feds have come in and said, okay, Director Brander, Director Gisborne, Director McCormick, here's money for your residents. And sure, the municipal directors can say, well, where's our share? And they'll say, well, it's over at city council. That's where that money is. So when we're talking about regional district, community works funds, that is money that is given to the regional district for the electoral area residents. And I want to make that very, very clear. When we talk about funding projects, and I heard, well, you know, some of the shared projects, you know, has there been any funding? On page 83 out of page 784, it has the Community Works Funds revenue and expenditures for 2021 and 2022. The Resource Recovery Center is a shared service. Everyone's paying for it. Municipal taxpayers and regional district electoral area taxpayers. To reduce the taxpayers' burden, we have already allocated $600,000 of community works funds to that project. That is not fair. Why is it that the electoral areas are handing over $600,000 when the municipality hasn't handed over any of their community works funds? That is one example that is at the heart of the issue with community works funds and how it's spent. I would be happy to support electoral area funding going to something like the Resource Recovery Center. But the municipal taxpayers should also contribute their fair share. This is why other regional districts typically have community works funds decided and discussed at the first stage by the Electoral Area Services Committee, because that is money given to the regional district for electoral area residents, and it's based on their population. If electoral area population goes down, our share of that funding goes down. If electoral area population goes up, then our share of that funding goes up. And if the UBCM was to say, we're going to give out community works funds, and we're just going to give it to regional districts and the municipalities can sort it out with the regional districts, then fine, the current policy would be great. But that would mean that the municipality wouldn't get any community works funds. It would all come to the regional district. But that's not the system we work in. That's not the system we have. Our policy should reflect the intention of that funding. So the motion before us, I get the intention and I like it, but I don't really know if it's going to get us to where we want to go. And that's why I actually like the original motion in the agenda that the committee discuss the current community works funds allocation. It's community works funds is complicated, and we should discuss it and figure out how we want to make sure that we allocate these funding in an equitable way. And yes, we can direct staff, but we could also direct the chair to create an electoral area services committee, and we can get the ball rolling over there. So I hope I've made that abundantly clear about what community works funds is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gizmar. It's like one clarification. I do not believe we can direct the chair to create a standing committee. We could ask the chair if he might consider it, but I think that's the chair's prerogative. But I'll pass this on to Director Doubt has had his hands up, I believe, or hand up.
I did. And I just want to address the difficulty that we have when we have an item on the agenda that says we'll have a discussion. And it turns out into a pretty important resolution. We have, I believe, a procedure by law that talks about motions being presented in writing in advance of the meeting, so directors have a chance to read them and prepare and look at the motions. We don't have that here. We've had what the agenda calls a discussion period, which was everybody had one opportunity to talk about the pretty wide-reaching item on the agenda. And now we have a motion in front of us, and it's a fairly complex motion, but it has very little detail in it about how that would take place. And right now, I can't support the motion on the floor because I really don't know what it means or understand exactly what it's trying to achieve. We'll leave it at that. I think.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd.
Well,
and I'll make it. Oh, sorry.
I can just finish.
Yes. Oh, I thought you were finished. My apologies.
What's fair and what's not fair when you're discussing apples and oranges is a difficult project, a difficult possibility. Director Gisborne talks about what the city pays for the Resource Recovery Center. The city actually does pay. Paid something like $600 million or $600,000 to build a road to the Resource Recovery Center this year. It's paid to extend city services out of the city's budget, not the regional district budget, but the city's budget, which already exceeds all of the contributions that Director Gisborne says the Community Works Fund made. So I think if we want to have a debate about what's fair and what's not fair, that's going to take us a really long time. And just what I'm saying is addressing the motion that's on the floor. I don't think it's complete. I don't think it's detailed enough, and I won't be supporting it as it is.
Thank you. I have a couple comments, which is, first of all, I'll reiterate that we don't need to finalize this today. I think I agree with some of the comments made on both sides. I understand the intent of the motion on the floor. I think some elements of it I agree with. Some elements of it I don't fully understand. For example, what the details are exactly for RD services in the area and so on. I think and the balance between making this what the exact policy changes would be. So I think if we're going to change the policy, we need to actually get to the point where we have a policy before us. And I think it would be based on the motion in the agenda, which again was discussed, which I believe we've done, and then direct staff. I would suggest that sending some information, having either referring this motion to staff for further work or a revised version of it, so that we can actually move this towards some options of policy changes if we want to, that we may or may not agree to, and maybe we end up with the same policy or with some changes. I think that would actually be more likely to advance this process. Director Gisborne, I believe, and I don't know if anyone else has their hands up. So
thank you. This will be my second kick at the can for this motion. One of the reasons why I had said I liked the original motion that the committee discussed the current Community Works Funds allocation policy is it reminds me of something our professional parliamentarian, Ellie Mina, had told us, and it's on his website. There is a myth that no discussion of an issue can take place until a motion is on the floor. In fact, the group can decide to discuss an issue informally first, exploring the nature of the problem, and only then propose a solution or an appropriate motion. Insisting a motion be on the floor before the problem is fully defined is equivalent to putting the cart before the horse, and you may end up solving the wrong problem. I think that's the correct way to go, is to actually discuss and define and explore the nature of the problem, and then the board, with a good understanding, or the committee in this case, provide clear direction to our staff on what we want this new policy to look like. Because we've discussed Community Works Funds a number of times, and we keep asking for more information from staff. And this report that's before us, as we've all agreed, is detailed, it's in depth, it's page 37 to page 150. I don't know how much more information we can ask for from staff. I think this committee needs to focus on what the problem is, what's the issue, and then we come up with a solution and we make a clear motion. But instead, it's sounding like Let's insist on putting the cart before the horse. And I don't think that's going to get us anywhere other than just putting more work on our staff. That's why I don't like the motion as it is. I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Elliott and then Director Brander. Director Brander and then Director Elliott. Director Brander.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'm not going to be voting in favor of this motion. There's a few different things in there that I don't like, but as I've reiterated in the past, earlier on, I don't like the concept of putting all the money into individual little pots because I don't see a point in it. It was mentioned by Director McCormick, support for an improvement district. Support for an improvement district in any one of our electoral areas has to be approved by the entire board anyways. It can't be decided by that electoral area director. So I don't see the current system as being a roadblock for an improvement district getting money. What I see as the roadblock is that the rest of the board has to agree to the expenditure. So personally, I like the term flexibility that's been mentioned here. I like to be able to use the money where it's the greatest need is, regardless of where it is. And the system that we have right now allows flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Elliott, did you still wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Fall. So I think the principles of equity that Director McCormick is trying to address are super important. And I understand that. Two things happen when we're looking at money. Anything you have to save for and do later, the budgets for those projects rise as time goes on. So if we become sticky with and inflexible with the way we can use our money, and I'm speaking even to the benefit of areas, if you're not able to shift it around to accomplish things in a faster manner, you're going to end up all paying more for everything you do. And I don't think that you want to put yourself in that position. I think you want a policy that talks about equity and perhaps maybe hitting targets for every 5 years or some such thing, while at the same time maintaining flexibility to shift stuff around so that you're able to quickly execute projects and not have to wait until your project fund has enough money in it, because you'll all end up paying more for every project that way. So those are my fears, and that's what I think this doesn't necessarily address all that well. And I'm wondering if there is a motion to be made that is not on the floor yet that would better address equity over a period of time, being a policy, and that your implementation is a little more flexible. That's what I would be hoping to see for this fund.
Okay, thank you, Director Elliott. Is there any further discussion? So we have the motion on the table. Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you. And I put the motion on the table really so that we could start fleshing out what this policy means to us. And perhaps we do need another staff report regarding a policy which addresses specifically the needs of electoral areas. So I would not be upset if that was the direction of this board. That we asked, and I know we've asked staff for a number of reports on this, but this is slightly different, asking for policy options which include allocations directly to electoral areas. I'd be very interested to see what that would look like. I didn't put specific dollar numbers in the motion because I think that it's important that finance staff who understand the numbers far better than I do, put those numbers in. So my thoughts are, if the motion does not carry, then I would like to put forward a second motion, which would ask staff once again, and I apologize for the work this is putting on them, but really we need to flesh this out to the point that we're satisfied with it. A motion for policy options, which include direct allocations to electoral areas. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say the policy that we have right now, as far as I know, there's absolutely nothing standing between all of the money being allocated to electoral areas, all of the money being allocated to regional services. It's all up to the board. So people can bring forward proposals. People can vote against proposals, debate. That's the beauty of it, is that we have the flexibility right now that we can sit at this table and decide which proposals, which projects deserve the money. As soon as we start splitting it off, now it just makes it more challenging. There's nothing stopping the board from saying, yes, we're going to approve this project that's in the electoral areas, or this one that's in the within the municipality benefits as well. I don't see the point in splitting it off further than it already is.
Okay, thank you. I think everyone, except myself maybe, has spoken twice on this. So I think I'll call the question on this and we'll see where it goes. So this is the motion that's been placed by Director McCormick, and I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? And Director Gisborne, so it does not carry.
I guess I supported it by not raising my hand.
So okay, so we don't have a motion on the table. So Director McCormick, you wanted to put an alternate. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Sorry. Can all those who voted in favor raise their hand?
Okay, all those who voted in favor.
Okay, and then all those who are opposed. Sorry, because yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't clear on who voted.
It looked like it was 3-3.
It was going to be 3-3. It doesn't matter. My vote either way wouldn't make a difference. So
Yeah, it does.
It does.
It does make a difference.
oh, it does. No, you didn't. No,
No, I guess
still
it would
fails.
be tied. Just
Yeah. So
50-50 is a fail.
okay. I think we need to work on this a bit more. So I look forward to the next motion, and hopefully we can get something somewhere, because we're already at 210 and we still have 600 pages. But so Director McCormick, do you have something that we might be able to debate?
Yes, thank you. And that is that we recommend the board ask staff for a report regarding policy options which allocate community building, which include allocating community building funds directly to electoral areas.
Okay, is that clear, Mr.?
Give me one moment. I'm almost. I think I have this. I'm just going to pull it up and you can confirm if I have it correct.
And we'll make sure our manager of financial services is clear on it too. But we have the motion, which has been moved and seconded, to ask staff for a report outlining policy options. And this is policy options regarding the existing policies. This is getting closer to something actionable to allocate allocating community building funds directly to electoral areas. Okay, so it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Director McCormick and then Director Gisborne.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. As I said in my preamble, I don't believe the way we do it currently is really fair to electoral areas. And when you look at all of the regional districts who have been polled in the staff reports, the vast majority of them give their funds directly to electoral areas. Many do 100%. Some split that. And so looking for policy options which will recognize the corporate need as well as the needs of electoral areas who really don't have any other funding options because there's no other financing available to them. So I support going ahead with yet another staff report, and I'm sorry about that because I recognize the workload. But I think it's important that we come to a solution that is fair, equitable, and that we're all happy with. So I think this would do the trick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Community Works Funds has been bashed around at this table. I think it came up months ago, and then we kicked it for a strategic planning session, and it came up at strategic planning session, and then we asked for, I think we discussed it in February and March, and then it got postponed in May, and now here we are in June, and we've got 113 pages of our previous staff report covering everything we can possibly think of in how Community Works funds can be allocated. And I just have to commend our staff for doing such a great and thorough job. And I think we're not getting any traction or any movement on this issue because, like I had talked about earlier, the board needs to provide direction. And this whole it's putting the cart before the horse. The cart's not moving because the committee and the board needs to, in my opinion, do what the motion is on the agenda, where the committee discuss the current Community Works Funds policy and then direct staff on any desired policy change. That's the motion that I thought we were going to be discussing today. Director Doubt is correct. Our policy and procedure is you put a motion on the agenda so that we can all read it and come to the meeting with an expectation for what we're going to do and how we're going to move forward. I came to this meeting with an expectation that we were going to discuss the Community Works Funds Allocation Policy 3.12, and then we would figure out how do we want to direct staff on any desired policy change. We haven't really done that. And I think asking for another report from staff isn't going to satisfy the issue we have at this committee. So I'm going to vote against this, but I don't know, maybe I'll write a policy and bring it forward at our next finance committee and put it on the agenda, because I don't support, well, I have to support the current policy, but I see issues with it. And we've got incredible information from our staff of other regional districts' policies. So that's my stance, is our committee should discuss this, set our expectations, and move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Gizmer. So I have a comment and a question, and then I'll see if there's anyone else. But the comment is that hopefully staff have been listening to this. I mean, I believe we have been having this discussion. This is every member of this committee spoken at least twice on this issue with comments at the beginning. And it's going to be difficult to come to specific policy changes. Eventually, we need to see what exactly the changes in policy look like. And so that leads to my question for Ms. Greenan, if she may. Is this motion providing sufficient guidance? And I guess more pertinent, is there enough clarity in the discussion to know what is meant, what options might be possible in terms of some of the more rigid approaches that have been talked about and the more flexible approaches? And I want to touch on something Director Elliott mentioned, which is about how do we look at targets, 5-year, for example, targets that could be built into the policy for review, which is a more flexible option versus a harder allocation. And does that give enough guidance to eliminate some of the other options that other regional districts have to help us narrow the scope down? I don't know if that's a long-winded question, but do you have enough clarity to move forward with this? Ms. Greenan?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, so what I've heard during the discussion is, that the directors are willing to, or would like to focus more on electoral areas, and but they still want some flexibility, and they want perhaps we should look at it on a cyclical basis and see how the funds have been allocated, and then maybe rebalance them so that they are more evenly distributed. And then also about setting targets. So I'm kind of thinking, it seems to me that the question maybe has to be reframed. So we're always looking at how the funds are allocated per electoral area, but I think the question is actually more at the crux of it is, as Director Gisborne pointed out, how do we decide where the funds are awarded? So it's more about rather than allocation to each electoral area. I think it is more about how we decide what the funds are awarded to. So I think if I could maybe get some direction to write a report as to how the directors decide which projects get the funding. And then maybe we could also consider, if you want to set targets, like that you want to have a certain percentage awarded to electoral area projects as opposed to regional projects, rather than where the money, when it comes in, where it goes, where is it going when it goes out?
Right, thank you. And I think for me, the percentage, if there's a percentage allocation, that's less relevant than the process. So how So I don't know if there's how the board decides on projects compared to what we have been doing, if there's a change. So I don't know if there's a possibility of an amendment that might be done, but I recognize Director Dowd. I see Director McCormick has her hand up, and maybe others, but Director Dowd hasn't spoken yet.
Like everything, when you have a free-ranging discussion, everybody hears something a little bit different. What I heard Director Brander say was that we have a process right now that involves every director on the regional district making a decision on the use of the community works funds, discussing every project and voting equally to make a decision on how we're going to deal with those. And if I remember correctly, Director Brander was saying he kind of likes that process because it doesn't limit, it doesn't divide into accounts particular funds for electoral areas. And it allows the regional district with all of the directors involved to make a decision on uses of the community works fund. I like that. I agree with it. And I think that's where we should go. So I won't be voting in favor of this decision to ask for another report, because I think actually that the most fair process is the one we're currently using that allows everybody to look at each project, make their determination, have a debate and discuss each one and make a decision on what each individual thinks is fair.
Thank you, Director McCormick, and hopefully we can bring this one to a vote without too many rounds. So
yeah, sure. I would like to ask if you could put the motion up on the screen again so that we can take a quick look at it. The motion that's on the floor. Okay, so this is asking for policy options, which include the allocation of funds to electoral areas, which of course is the way most regional districts do it. This isn't making a decision. It doesn't take away the board's authority to make the decision down the road. And it really asks for what would it look like if we were to allocate funds directly to electoral areas. So I think it's worthy to get that information back so that we can get a further and even more informed discussion regarding what we want to do in the future. I also recognize that this funding stream expires at the end of next year. And if the decision is made to start a new policy with the start of a new funding stream in 2025, that would also make a lot of sense. So I support the motion that is on the table so that we can get that information back and continue to discuss what is the best, what is the fairest way to proceed with regarding the allocation of these funds. Thank you.
Okay, Director Gisborne, second round.
Thank you, Chair. Directing staff based on our discussion, I have an issue with. Because when we have a committee, there's an old saying, you get 7 people in a room and you'll have 12 opinions. What I said 5 or 10 minutes ago, I may not agree with now. That's part of having an open mind and having us go around the table like this. Boards and committees speak by resolution, because I've heard multiple directors with multiple opinions and multiple stances on our Community Works Funds policy. For us to then turn to Ms. Greenan and say, can you write us a policy on all the discussion you heard? Well, some of us are contradicting each other. We're not on the same page. That's the whole purpose of having a committee in the decision-making process. And then we speak through resolution and we give a clear direction to our staff. That helps clarify what we as a collective want to do, rather than what I said and another person said, because myself, I got more to say on community works funds, but I'm still hung up on this process. So we should be providing very clear direction to our staff by resolution. So I don't think we should be having another staff report. I like the resolution because it's a step in the right direction. But if we keep going in at this speed in this direction with our cart with no horse, by the time we actually amend our community works funds policy, there might not be any community works funds left to be handed out. So I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little frustrated. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to make a final comment, and I think, I see Director Brander, so I'll make my comment and then call the question ideally. I have some ideas that could be brought forward, and I'm not going to do it at this meeting. I think they'll come at a later meeting about in the section in the policy 3.12, section 5 says the following project areas shall be given priority, and that gives staff direction on what can be prioritized. So projects that align with strategic priorities, projects that address capacity building, and so on. I think that's where we should look for consensus. I believe we can find some consensus there on changes to that section that would meet all the interests that have been raised. But I'm not going to put them forth now because I don't want to be wordsmithing policies and motions on the fly. So Director Brander, you have your hand up, I believe.
Yeah, a second. I was going to say, I believe we have a fair policy right now, and I don't see the concept of allocating money to be spent specifically in electoral areas as being an improvement. I see it. We have the power right now, so there's no reason to change it. So I'll be voting against the motion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll wrap that up there, and I'll call the question. So this is the one that the motion put forward by Director McCormick. So all those in favor? Asking for a staff report, I'll put my hand up. And all those opposed? Yeah. So it did not pass, as I could understand from the comments. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that. We don't have, I mean, we have a big agenda, I think, to consider more discussion on this item. Without motions before us, we'll take more time than we have today. And I think it would be better for directors who are interested in doing something related to community works fund policy to bring forward through the process. And as I said at the beginning, there is no giant hurry on this. We can, this can come forward at a later time and we can work through it. So unless there's something more on this, Director Gisborne, you have your hand up.
Yeah, we're an hour and a half in, and I was wondering if we could have a 5-minute bio break.
Yes. So okay, let me just make sure we're finished with this item. We'll move on to reports after this. And why don't we take a 5-minute bio break before we pick up the rest of this big agenda. So we'll reconvene at 2:30, 2:31.
Gary, did you want to move out? Maybe that's however. Yes. Waiting room. Okay,
And the press is back in.
there she is.
Great. Okay, so we ready to continue? Carry on. So we are moving on to reports.
Statement of financial information.
Yep, so interim financial statements. There's several recommendations. Number one is to accept the information for except for information, the interim financial statements. Someone want to make the recommendation? Director Gisborne, Director Brander, is there any discussion on that item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, none carried. So this next one is to recommend the board approve a budget amendment to recognize funding for the BC Growing Communities funding. Director Gisborne, someone want to second that?
Yeah.
Brander, is there any discussion? Director Gisborne?
I have a question because, yeah, this BC Growing Communities grant funding is something that's being handed over by the province to, say everyone's doing a great job. My question is, if we want to allocate this funding to other services like water systems or sewer systems up in Lund per se, and I know how our services are siloed, can we take this, 1.3 million out of general administration and move it to these other services? Is that something that'll be allowed if this motion passes?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course. This will work exactly the same as the Community Works Funds, where we have it in one service just to administer it. And then when the board decides what projects would benefit from it, then we can move it to those services. So I think that the next step would be for staff to put forward a report with ideas around which projects would benefit from this fund, because the funds are supposed to be spent by the end of 2024.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Is there any other comments? I'd like to make one comment, which just to say that I want to thank Ms. Green and other financial staff for taking the time to add all the notes. I mean, I think that took a lot of effort, and it really helped me go through that item very quickly to just focus on the items that were out of expected range and to explain them. It made total sense to me, so I'm very happy with these statements. Okay, seeing no further discussion, I will call the question on the item 2. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. So item 3 is to approve a budget amendment for electoral area feasibility studies. Director Brander, Director Gisborne, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Unanimous. Okay, thank you. On to number 8.3, surplus or deficit. There's a motion before us for approving. Director Gisborne. Director Brander, is there any discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, I don't believe. Okay, I'll just check. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Carried. Thank you. Making good time. Item 8.4, the statement of financial information. So this is to approve. The motion is to approve. Director Gisborne. Director Brander, is there any discussion? Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I just have one question. And I see it on page 354 out of 784, or page 16 out of 50 on the report. Municipal Finance Authority debenture debt. I see city debt 32 million and regional district debt 34 million. So is my understanding correct that 94% of the regional district's MFA debt is actually city debt. Is that correct?
Ms.
Because
Green?
we loan them money.
Ms. Green?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the city's debt goes through, it flows through the regional district. So the Municipal Finance Authority provides the funding, takes the debt payments from us, and then the city of Paul River reimburses us. So it's just a flow through, but it does show up on our financial statements as debt, and then it is recovered.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. No further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Any other item? I'd just like to say I really found the financial indicators interesting. I think that gives a really good high level view of different facets of our picture, and a lot of our metrics are in the range of either average or better than average. A few are on the bit high side, but I found them really interesting. I think it's really good information for us at this table. Okay, seeing no further debate, I will call the question on this. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Carried. Okay, so we are on to item 8.5, Director's Remuneration, Expenses, and Contracts. What's move the recommendation? Is there seconder? Director Brander. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Okay, financial assistance. So first off, I'd like to, this is going to be a big item. This is one of our biggest today, of course. So staff have done a really good job of making objective assessments based on our policy and brought forward a lot of recommendations here. And it is up to the board to debate and refine those allocations and to consider balances and trade-offs. As the staff report states, the recommendations are one scenario and the board may choose to revise that as needed. What I propose we do to keep, to keep our sanity and keep our focus on the pots of funding is to consider the recommendations by funding source and by block. So take, for example, starting with general grants and aid, and then, the ones that are allocating to areas A, B, C, D, and so on. And if we look at those in blocks, I will ask the board if they would like to remove any of the items from the recommendation if they disagree with the recommendation, and then the remaining ones I'll ask for a motion to adopt those recommendations like a consent agenda, and then we can debate the other items, and that might help us move more quickly through. So let's give this a try, Director Elliott.
I'm in conflict in item 4, so if you include it in the block, I would be excluded from the conversation on all of them.
We'll pull that one out then. So item 4 is out. So if we have our general, if we try this and we'll see how it works, general grant and aid, are there any other ones people would like to pull out from the general? That's Director Dowd and then Director Brander.
Well, I'm not sure there, you talked about electoral area grants and how you're constructing these blocks. I don't think they're logically arranged that way on the current agenda.
The first 4.
They are. They're grouped by funding source.
Yeah, the first 4 are the general, and the rest are area.
So are we looking at doing it like 4 at a time?
So we're looking. Well, what we're looking, if we were to try this, what I'm suggesting is we look at the first 4, which have been identified from general grants and aid because it has a budget, and if any directors pull any out, and the ones we don't pull out, we'll assume our general agreement, and we can vote on those to fund them, and then we can have discussion on the ones that are pulled out. And some of these might go quicker, some might not.
So if we want to adjust the amount or where it comes from,
then pull it out. Then pull it. So are there any that people would like out of the first 4, Director Brander?
The first 2, please.
First 2. Okay. So it's not going to work well with the general one.
You don't always happen this way.
Okay, let's just do the general ones in order. We'll do them in the order. Okay. So up first is the.
Sorry.
Org. That's okay. No. I think I expected the general grant and aid one may be more difficult. It might be easier for some of the other ones. Okay, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to recommend the committee recommend to the board that the board approve a grant of $17,000 to the Powell River Outdoor Recreation Users Group Trail Society for annual trail maintenance from the General Grants and Aid Service.
Second that. Director Brander.
Chair, thank you. I love all the work that this group does, or these groups underneath the umbrella of ORUG. I also think that we have to be smart with how we spend the money, because we have more requests coming in the fall. I believe I have it down, last year we gave 15,000. That's been more in line with what we have done in the past. So I see nothing wrong with increasing that by $2,000 to kind of cover the additional expenses of inflation. So that's where I arrived at $17,000.
Yeah, that's great. Director Brander, Gisborne.
Yeah. In 2019, we gave them $23,000. Then, of course, we had the pandemic. So a lot of our nonprofit user groups were hit in their volunteerism. And I know a number of organizations are trying to get back on their feet. So they're trying to come out of the gate strong this year. I'm not sure if ORUG is looking to do something similar to try and, rebuild their numbers and, support their volunteers. But there's something about ORUG that reminds me about something I thought about in my first term. We were talking about our regional parks and trails, and there had been some discussion, I think 2017 or 2018, before I was first elected, about the regional district potentially hiring a manager to, help apply for grants and to help with the outdoor recreation user groups and help support our trail system. That would not be a cheap thing for us to do. The discussion back then was that, we don't need to hire someone to tell the outdoor recreation user groups how to work and maintain their trail. And my position at the time was I would rather double the funding to the outdoor recreation user group and let them continue with the good work that they're doing and let them keep working at it and not tell them what to do or have any staff, being hired to work on that. I know that's not the issue that we have before us today. We're not talking about hiring someone to work with them. That's from 5 years ago. But my position is still the same, that I would gladly fund the outdoor recreation user group to keep on with the work that they're doing, as long as it's volunteer driven and volunteer directed. And if they need a little bit of extra money for training or liability coverage or whatever else they need, because we have an incredible backcountry that ORUG isn't just one organization. They represent a lot of groups. And in 2019, we gave them $23,000. And for us to go down to $17,000, I think that's going to be a little bit insulting to them. Myself, I was hopeful when I heard that this had been pulled, because their original ask was, 58,000, and the recommended was 56. Myself, I'd be in support of 58,000. Let them keep up the good work they're doing. So I'll be voting against this motion. And if other directors do join me, I'll be very happy to put forward a motion of the 58,77.2, which is what they asked for. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so there's Director Elliott and Director Dowd.
Thank you, Chair Fall. So coming out of the pandemic, we are and with the recent hit of the mill closure, we're re-envisioning our region, everybody. Our trail network is something we're marketing as being, amazing, and it is. It's supporting our economy on a number of levels with visitors. And I think we don't want to be sending the message that that isn't incredibly important to all of us. So I think 17 is too small. I do understand that this is a huge increase over the time that was in the pandemics, but they're also trying to train up people, and they have expenses they haven't had while they were a little less active. If we're to have amazing trails for people to utilize, it would be way more expensive to do it without this volunteer organization. The amount of work that they do and the value that goes into that is considerably higher. So I just see this as being an incredibly good investment. I would be in favor of a higher number.
Okay, Director Dowd.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the original motion that's in the package for $56,543. And in the notes on page 8 of the report, I note that what the recommendation staff has is to provide 25% of the overall cost of the project, which was covered in the grant, as a which is consistent with the board's financial policies 3.111 to provide 25% of an overall project, as opposed to their application, which would have been 26% of the project. So I'm in favor of the $56,000 number and would like to go with that.
Okay, I'll add my 2 cents to this. I'm supportive of the motion on the table. I don't mind a little bit more, but I cannot support a single application receiving more than 25% of the total funding source. Our general grants and aid fund is $96,000, and $56,000 request, or the 58 original request, is more than 50% of that. And I think that's not equitable across the regional district. I don't think it's equitable to other groups. The staff form for the application says prior year contributions were limited by available funds. They're also limited this year by available funds. And I have some motions coming later in related to Area E to ask for funds from general grants and aid for 2 projects that have regional benefit. And I don't think it's fair to allocate such a huge percentage. A little bit more I would be okay with, and I'm going to support the recommendation or the motion on the table. Director McCormick?
Thank you. Question. If we approve the recommendation that's on the table now, is there anything that would prevent ORUG from coming back in the second intake and asking for additional funding at that time?
I believe not, but maybe Mr. Cohenhoven can answer that.
Thank you. Through the chair. No, there is nothing that would stop them from coming back in intake 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Gisborne, second round on this.
Yeah, I guess when I said I would vote against this motion, I think what I should have said is I should put forward an amendment. You are correct. We are limited by our budget because we've adopted the budget at the end of March. We changed our policy a couple of years ago so that the intake would occur after we adopted our budget. I've spoken with some other regional districts. They find that odd that we would say, okay, this is how much money we're going to give out before we even know how much people are going to need. This is, we put ourselves in this position. We've adopted a budget, and then we ask the public to come out and say, okay, how much money do you need? And then we go, oh, well, we didn't put enough money in general grant and aid to actually give you the money that you need. And I think I said it last year, it's like we passed the budget blind in this regard, because our grants, we've got, 8 different pools to pull from. The Power River Outdoor Recreation User Group Society is doing tremendous work. I want to see them keep doing the work, because we've seen what BC Parks and the lack of work that they've been doing up at inland resulted in. So I'm going to put forward an amendment to strike out 17,000 and have that replaced with 56,543 is what the original motion number. So if I get a second.
Is there a seconder for that, Director Dowd?
Yeah. That was the original recommendation from staff. It is higher than what we gave them last year and the year before, but we've been limited on how much we've given them each year because we didn't allocate sufficient funds in general grant and aid. And when we adopt our budget, we take a look at what was allocated the year prior and we do something similar. If we pass this motion now, then we're giving an indication to the board for next year's financial plan to put more money in general grant and aid. And we, in my opinion, looking at the grant requests from ORUG over the years, we have been underfunding them. They have asked us, just slide down here. Just want to make sure I have the right numbers. Gotta make sure I have the right numbers here, sorry. They got a lot of information in their sheet. Salmon Society. But yeah, each year we have been giving them less while they keep asking for more. And it's warranted the amount of money that they're asking for. So yes, here we go. They asked in 2018, 22,000, then 23,000, then 42,000, then 40,000, and 42,000 was last year was what their ask was. And what we have done is in 2019 gave them 23,000 and then 16,000, or rounded up to 17,000, and then we gave them 14,000, and then we gave them 15,000. What we've been giving them has been going down. And they're, I can only guess, struggling to try and keep their volunteers. And I presume that they're probably not feeling appreciated. So my stance is give them the 56,000, show them that we do appreciate them. And when we do go to adopt our budget next year, put in sufficient money into our general grant and aid. That's not their problem, that's ours. Thank you.
I'll recognize Director Brander, and then I'll put my name on the list.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to remind everybody, we have to decide on a budget. We don't have bottomless pockets. We can't go to the public and just say, hey, what do you need? We can give it to you. We can't do that. The public relies on us to make the difficult decisions. We set the barrier and we say, we have this much money. We have to figure out where to allocate it to. And more people keep asking for money. Good projects, I'm not denying that. But if there are more people with hands out, then we have less money to give to each individual one. We have to make the hard decisions. ORUG is close to my heart. I've done lots of volunteering. I've supported many of these organizations. So it's not that I don't have a heart for these groups. I've been the guy out in the bush digging the trails or making signage for them. They're volunteers. We do it because we love to do it. And I would love to support them to the state of $56,000, but I know we don't have the funds to have it all go around to everybody. And I also don't think it's fair to expect that of the taxpayers. So I thought it was generous to offer 17,000. It was a bump from last year. I could entertain slightly more than that, but there's no way that I can vote for 56,000 because I know it's going to come at the detriment of other worthy organizations in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brander. And I concur with those comments. I want to first say every funding agency I'm aware of sets a budget and then has an allocation. When you look at the grants we apply for, the province doesn't come up with the number after the applications. They have a certain pot of money and then they allocate it and they make the hard decisions. I think we owe a fiduciary duty to our residents to do that. I think we can look at last year's requests and increase our budget as we have done, but I think to get applications and then come up with the tax dollars isn't right from the taxpayer point of view. I'd like to point out the motion that I'm speaking against the amendment on the table. This amount is 59%. This amendment would allocate 59% of our general grants and aid to one organization. For 96,000, it would leave 40,000 for all the rest. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to make a case when we get to item 16 and item 19 that especially the layered history project put forth from Lesquity for $10,000 is a regional project, should be funded from the regional district. Lesquity pays into it. ORUG's a great group, but it does not benefit Lesquity directly. And the layered history project does benefit everybody, and I'll make that case later. I think if we allocate this much money after we set our budget to one organization, we are doing a disservice to other organizations. We're doing exactly what we talked about, what we didn't want to do related to the Community Works Fund, which is limiting flexibility to other organizations. We're tying it all up. And ORUG's a great group, but to give 59% to one organization is simply not fair. It's not fair to other groups, and it's not fair to Lesquity. So I'm going to vote against this. I'm happy to support something a little bit higher, but as I mentioned earlier, no more than 25% for one project, I think, is a good policy. You want to use as a guideline. Director Elliott.
Thank you. I have been trying to figure out what the ultimate number is, and I don't really know, but I would like to speak to your assumption that this is a single project, because it isn't. It's a very organized request from about 6 different organizations pooled their requests together. So it represents the bomb squad, the bikers, the Sunshine Coast Trail, the
Chain gang.
pause, the chain gang. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of different projects, not a single project. And they're similar in that they do support trails in the backcountry, but the backcountry is excessively large and there are an awful lot of them. The idea that they could train together, coordinate, and put all of their requests through a single organization to the regional district to organize how that gets funded is also valuable, which is what Mark was speaking to. So it is not a single project. It's quite a number of projects that are organized through a single window of application. It's also a trail network that is making Pelt River, that region, known worldwide for its trail networks, and people come here just to go on those trails. So supporting an organization that is contributing that much to our overall economy is really, really important. I don't know what the ideal number is, and I do take the point that it being a considerably high percentage of our overall available funding is probably, you know, something we need to look at. I still think it has to be a huge priority for our region to maintain these trails, and doing it outside of this type of organization would be considerably more money. So.
Okay, Director Gisborne, you want to make one more kick at the can? I think we need to move on and we'll vote on this. Director McCormick first, Director McCormick, and then Director Gisborne. But
yeah, thank you. I'll speak against the amendment. I do support the original recommendation that was put on the table. For all of the reasons that you said, I think it is kind of a lot of money to allocate to one group, even though it's an umbrella organization. But I would also encourage them to come back for the second round of grant funding and apply again for additional funding at that time. So I'll speak again. I'm against the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne, very brief because we're
yeah. This is my second kick of the can.
Oh, it is your second. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why ORUG does what they do is so that each one of their groups doesn't have to keep coming and asking for money. You know, there's so many hardworking volunteers in this community that don't want to be sitting there filling out paperwork over and over and over again. So the reason why I like what they've done is, rather than having pause and bomb and all these groups filling out paperwork, they pooled it together. They got one application. I don't see the purpose of asking them to come and apply at our second intake, because it's the same pool of money. And I'd just like to correct some misinformation. It's not 54% of the funding available. General grant and aid has $96,000 in it, but the total funds available for all of our grants is $291,000. The motion on the table is to allocate $56,000, which is what the original staff recommendation was, and that is 19% of the total funds available, not 50, 19. That's what we're talking about here of the total grant funding available that our board will be discussing. And if this amendment fails at committee, I'd also like to remind everyone that when this comes to the board, general grant and aid is a weighted vote amongst our whole board. So this will be up to the municipal directors when and or if it does come before the board. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Director Dout.
You know, I'm speaking in favor of the amendment, and the distribution, the percentage of a grant compared to a particular grant and aid division of the grant and aid service or all the granting funding. If we're going to make regulations about the percentages that people can apply for, We should create a policy that does that. Right now, the current policy, we have 3.11 that's being applied in a number of different places, as far as I can see, is to cover 25% of the cost of a project, not more than that. And we're limiting contributions in a couple of cases because they've asked for slightly more than 25% of the project. So if you talk about 25% being $56,000 being 25% of the program, you can see this resulting in something like $200,000 worth of benefit to the community. I think that's a good deal. I think we have to take it. We should take advantage of the fact that ORUG has gone together and brought all of the trail groups together and to make one application and to do it in a reasonable way and provide the information to us about what they can do in the back country. It's not regional parks, because none of this is in parks. I think most of it is on Crown land or in forest resource companies' hands. And I think we should come up with that $56,000 for $3 because it's something useful. It's a definite contribution to the area.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a brief comment and then call the question just to address how that I came up with 59%. Our pots of money for grants and aid are in different pots and they cannot exceed that. Our general grant and aid is 96,000 and we cannot exceed that. 56,000, the amendment of 56,543 represents 59% of the available funds in that pot of money, meaning at least 40,000 for grants and aid, which will severely limit the ability to address and support the other projects that are going to be before us today. But with that, we'll just see where this goes, and I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment to change 17,000 to 56,543. All those in favor? Opposed? I'm opposed. Director McCormick, Director Brander. The amendment fails. We're back to 17,000. Is there any further discussion on the main motion of 17,000? Director Gisborne, Director Brander. And then Director.
Yeah, I'll just like to remind everyone that if this same motion goes before the board, that vote would have been 8 out of 13 total votes.
Director, can we focus on the motion before us? That's not how this committee works, and we'll deal with the board at the board. Thank you.
Well, I'm just letting everyone know.
I understand Director Brander
Chair,
has the table.
I have the floor.
Go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I just want everyone to know that if that vote passes at the board, then that will have an impact on the funding that we could be passing resolutions at this meeting for other things from general grant and aid. So I just want the directors to think about that, because this motion could become 56,000 at the board level. So
I want to focus on this motion. We're not at the board. Director Brander.
This is the motion before us.
The motion is 17.
And I'm just talking about the process of how that vote functions after we pass it, because it is to recommend that the board, right? The motion is that the committee.
I understand, Director Gisborne. We got your point, I believe. Could we focus on the motion, which is 17,000 for ORUG?
Yeah, recommending to the board. And I was just explaining how that functions at the board.
Yeah, and I think we understand. So Director Brander, you had your hand up.
And you can do that without interrupting me. Thank you, Chair.
Director Brander?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, I guess it's probably appropriate, but I was wondering if I could make an amendment to change 17,000 to 23,000 in the motion.
I'd second that. Okay, so we have an amendment on the table to change 17,000 to 23,000. Is there any debate on that amendment, Director Brander?
I mean, I'll just say that I came up with this number because we have given them 23,000 in the past. I think we were quite generous back then when we did it. I also believe that the members of ORUG will be quite pleased to receive 23,000 after their ask. Thank you.
Any other discussion on that? Okay, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? 3 opposed. Director Bout, Director Gisborne, and Director Elliott are opposed. Okay, so that amendment does not fail. We're back, that fails, I should say. We're back at the main motion, which is 17,000. So let's, Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not in favor of this one either. I can see we're kind of at an impasse because we're not getting a number that I feel is representative of what is needed here, passed at this level. And my recommendation, I think if I were to put forward a recommended amendment, it would be closer to $36,000 because it would represent the raise and the increased activity that they're trying to do coming out of the pandemic, and represents better a very generous recognition of what this does for us all economically. And so that would be my recommendation.
Sorry, are you moving that?
Yeah, I would like to move an alternate, but I don't know if we're even allowed to at this
Yeah,
time.
you're allowed. We're allowed to. So that would be an amendment for 36,000. Is that what you're proposing?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a proposed amendment. So to change the 17,000 to 36,000 on the table. Is there any further discussion? We've gone around the corner on this. So I think I'll call the vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, and against. I'm not in favor. So Director Fall, Director Doubt, Director Brander not in favor. So it fails. Okay, we're back to the main motion. I think I should just call the question and see where it goes, because unless unless we want to postpone this to the next finance meeting. So I will go ahead, seeing that no one's doing that, call the question on the main motion, 17,000 for ORUG. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Gisborne, Director Elliott, and Director Doubt opposed. So it does not pass. So there we are. So we can either just leave it there unless there's another motion coming, but we've put forward various motions. I think we need to move on to the next item. So let's move on to item 2, that the committee recommend the board. So this is the Salmon Society is making a request. Does someone want to make the motion? Director Doubt? Which is to move the recommendation?
That's right.
Okay, someone want to second that? Okay, is there any discussion on this item? Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. I was quite confused by the application, particularly by the project budget. The funding and the expenditures aren't equal amounts. It was not made clear how much funding is currently secured or how much is actually anticipated. They mentioned they were going to apply to community forest, but we don't know how much they're hoping to get from the community forest. I mean, I really appreciate the good work of the Salmon Society, but it's hard for me to make a decision or support this kind of an expenditure when there's so many unanswered questions. I do know that they need money for a new truck box, some new tech, some new office equipment. I'd be prepared to replace 27 with 15 and make an amendment to that to 15,000. At least that gives them something to start with. But it's hard for me to just approve it when I don't see any numbers that are actually backing up what they're asking for.
Okay, so that's an amendment to change the request to 15,000. Is there a seconder for that? Okay, so Director Elliott, is there any discussion on this item? Director Elliott?
I just have a question first. Does anybody know in the through the application process if the Salmon Society has done any consultation with the nation around their upgrades and the work they're trying to do around salmon conservation?
Director, sorry, Mr. Cohenhoven, you may be able to answer that. See your hand up.
Thank you, through the chair. Unfortunately, I do not have that answer. I was in contact with the Salmon Society about a variety of questions and topics, but I, having probably done the most contact with them, I did not ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion on this item? I will, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, it looks like. That's carried. Okay, so the next one is the Vancouver Island North Film Commission.
That's just the amendment, Chair.
Oh, that was just the amendment. Sorry, right. Thank you. Okay, so we're on the main motion. The main motion now before us has 15,000 instead of the request or the amount in the agenda. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Doubts opposed. It carries. Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on to item 3, which is the Vancouver Island North Film Commission request, the recommendations for $3,000. Would someone like to make a motion? Director Brander?
I'll make the recommendation.
Is there a seconder for that? I'll second that. Okay. Director Elliott seconded it. So is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. It carries. Okay, and Director Elliott, I believe, wants to go look at what outside world looks like for a few minutes. Come get you.
Helping people with horses.
That's good.
Which was that?
Okay, thank you. So now we're on to item 4, which is the Therapeutic Riding Association request recommendation for $5,000. Director Gisborne, is there seconder? Director Brander, is there any debate on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? All in favor, unanimous. We will move back to, we'll get Mr. Director Elliott back in the room.
Come back, Cindy.
I don't think she can hear us.
She can hear you.
Okay, so we have before us, I'll let Director Elliott sit down. We have 5 projects that are supposed to be funded by A, B, C, and D: Cathette Art, Townsite Jazz, Prisma, Cathette Film Society, and Logger Sports. Would anyone like to pull one of those out for separate discussion? Okay. If not, would someone like to, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused. One sec. So we're talking about that art, or are we talking about like all of them?
All 5.
So what I'd like to propose for efficiency, if we can do this, is that if we don't pull any out, we can pass 4 recommendations, 4 through 8 in one, 4 through 9 in one motion, minus any that are pulled out.
5 through 9.
5 through 9. Yeah, 5. Oh, 5. Let's get that art number 4. A, B, C, D. Oh, sorry. I'm looking right. I'm looking at the wrong numbers here. Right.
I would like to discuss
4 through 8. Okay.
I would like to discuss each of them as we go down.
Okay. I think if people want to discuss things, maybe my idea for efficiency won't work. So let's just go on to number 5 then. Go to Cathette Art, which has a recommendation from A, B, C, and D. Is there a motion to be made? Director Brander, is that recommendation? Seconder? Director Elliott, discussion? This is Cathette Art. Director Gisborne?
Yeah, last year we gave Cathette Art $2,500, and then this year we're looking at $12,000. So that's a big jump. I would be comfortable with going from $2,500 to $3,000 because we did just have quite a bit of discussion that, you know, there's only so much money in the pot and there's only so much money to go around. And yes, I would like to support the Cathette Arts. As my understanding is, if we can show, well, if they can show that they're getting support from us, they can then get provincial and I think also federal funding. But I think, you know, with all these asks that are on our list, I think the $12,000 it's a bit much. I would be comfortable with going to 3,000. Would you need a specific amendment, or would you need me to?
I think we need
individuals.
Well, I guess staff, if we make an amendment, if amendments made for the total amount, can the amount be deemed to be calculated right now, or can we? Mr. Cohenhoven, you might be able to help with these.
Through the chair, yeah, we've got the math ready to go.
Okay, so is that an amendment, Director Gisborne?
Yes, it is an amendment for total of 3,000.
Right, and Mr. Cohenhoven will come up, and while he's doing that, maybe we can have discussion on that amendment. Director Dowd?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with adding all kinds of new requirements in to the grant funding request. We don't have a policy that says that it has to be equal, then increased by only a certain amount from the previous year's grant funding. People apply, they give us their report, they may come make a presentation to the board, ask any questions of the board, and the board has an option or answer any questions the board has to ask. They present a program, they present the budget for the funding that they would like to have. And all of these requests, as is shown in the report that staff made up, can be done within the funding that there is in the grant budget granting. So I'm in favor of passing this one for Cathette Art in the amount that is in the package, which is a total of $12,000.
Is there any other discussion on that? Okay, so I think Director Gisborne.
Can we just get some clarity, Chair?
Yes.
We just need to know who seconded the amendment.
Director, right, who seconded that? Did Director Elliott second that?
I don't remember.
We don't
Put
have
me down as seconding it. Put me as seconding it, that's fine.
Yeah. I'm looking at prior year requests, and Director Dowd is correct. We don't have a policy about how it impacts the pool of money on our end. We have a policy for, how much these groups can ask. When we talked about community works funds earlier, Director Brander was correct. It is up to the board to have the final decision. It is up to the board to vary from the policy. The policy is a good guideline, but it is up to the board to make that final decision on what we feel is appropriate to the taxpayers and to our own budget. The Cathette Arts applied in 2021 for $15,000 and they got zero. In 2022, they applied for $15,000 again. And then we gave them $2,500. This time around, as part of their budget, it looks like they've got some funding from the provincial government. That's really good news. And I heard of another organization years ago, and we asked, I said, well, why are you applying for only a couple of $100s? And it's to unlock that funding from senior level governments. Yes, there is enough money in the pool to hand out money to all of these organizations, but as has also been brought up, there will be a second intake. And if we allocate the vast majority of our funding at this intake, that might, discourage folks from applying at the second intake. I think going from 0 to 2,500, now going up to $3,000, I think is appropriate. It shows that, look, we're still going to support you. It doesn't show that, okay, we're gonna go the full amount, and we want to keep seeing Cathette Art working and succeeding. So that's why I'm in favor of going from last year's 2,500 to this year being 3,000, because we as a board can vary from our policy and keep supporting and strike a balance. So that's why my thoughts are 3,000. Thank you, Chair.
So on the amendment, so this is to change the motion, the recommendation from 12,000 to 3,000, and we'll see the screen. So this is the actual amendment split out by area. Okay, so changing the various numbers in that, so the areas A, B, C, D add up to 3,000. Is that clear? So I'll call the question on the maybe we could take that down so I can see the room. Thank you, Mr. Cohenhoven. I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? I'm in favor too. And all those opposed? 2 opposed, Director Dowd and Director Elliott. Okay, so on the main motion, which is for $3,000, is there any further debate? I will call the question. And so it's what we saw a moment ago. I'll call the question on that. All those in favor of the main motion and all those opposed? Director Dowd. Okay. That carries on to the next item, which is item 6. So this is for the Jazz Festival and for ABCD with total funding of $4,000. Is there anyone wanting to make a motion on that? Director.
The recommendation.
Recommendation. Or seconder?
Well, second.
Director Gisborne, any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, Director Gisborne.
Sorry. I have a question. And from reading the report, Townsite Jazz requested $4,000 from the city of Powell River, and it looks like they're also requesting $4,000 from the regional district. Are those numbers correct?
Mr. Cohenhoven, is that?
Thank you, through the chair. That is correct. They had the same ask from both governments. And if it helps your decision at all, they were not successful in getting that grant from the city of Powell River.
Oh. Well, then do I still have the floor, Chair?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Well, my initial thoughts were that if Townsite Jazz got the $4,000 from the city, when we split up the regional district on population, and this motion is only taking money from the electoral areas, I would have been in support of $2,000 coming from the electoral areas if the municipality had contributed $4,000. But hearing that the city didn't find it worthwhile to provide the $4,000 to Townsite Jazz, well, now I'm not in favor of even providing $2,000. So I'm actually going to be opposed to this motion. Unless one of the city directors would like to correct me on maybe there is more funding.
Okay, is there any further debate on this? Okay, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I think when we start to get into the minutia of who pays for what, it can get very ugly and very confusing very quickly. I think we have to make a decision based on what we as regional district directors want to do, and place less importance on what the municipality does. I think the Townsite Jazz Festival is a good program. I really appreciate the fact that they have free performances that anybody can attend. So I am quite happy to support this.
Okay, Director Dowd.
Speaking as a director of the regional district, I want to point out that the motion includes $1,866.20 from the. No, I'll just back off on that, and I'll point out that I think it's a valuable project, and I'd be in favor of the grant.
Okay, so Director Gisborne, second round.
Yeah, well, seeing as how there's support from the municipal directors at our table, then perhaps rather than giving $4,000 from the electoral areas only, maybe we should give $4,000 from general grant and aid, and then it's paid for by everyone in the region. Therefore, I will move for an amendment that the committee recommend to the board that the board approve a grant of $4,000 to the Townsite Jazz Festival Society from general grant and aid.
Is there a seconder for that? Director McCormick. Okay, any discussion on that? I'll speak to it, and that adds Lasqueti in there, and it does two things that I'm not in favor of. A, it forces Lasqueti to pay for something that our citizens, our residents will be hard pressed to benefit from. And B, it reduces our general grants and aid further, and I've already had some careful thought that will be coming up about requests for support from this board for funding from general grants and aid for Lasqueti. So I'm in favor of leaving it the way it is. Is there any discussion on that? So this is on the amendment to move the funding source to general grants and aid. And I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment and opposed to the amendment? Director Brander, Director Dowd, Director Fall, the amendment does not pass. So back to the main question. So I think we can call the question on this. So $4,000 from ABCD. Ready for, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Director Gisborne is opposed, and it passes. Okay, so number 7, $1,000 split between A, B, C, and D. Would someone like to move? Director Brander, is that the recommendation?
Yep.
The seconder for that? I'll second that. Any debate, discussion on the Director Brander?
Thanks. I just want to say, I think Prisma is a quality organization, and they have been able to prove time and time again that the amount of money they bring into the community more than justifies the expenditure, the grant and aid that we give to them.
Great. Is there any further, Director McCormick?
Thank you. Just to clarify, that the amount from Area D is $27.82 and
yes,
34 cents.
So Ms. Sturton, could you repeat the number again? That was, we made that amendment in our agenda approval. So the number for Area D is not as printed, but it's, I'll let Ms. Sturton say the number.
Sure, thank you to the chair. Oh, the number that I have is $2,782.39.
Yes, that's the number that is in our adopted agenda, and that's in the motion that we're putting forward right now. Okay, so any further discussion? I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Elliott is opposed?
No,
okay.
I was just slow.
Just okay, you're in favor. Sorry, I'm trying to save 2 seconds of time here. Okay, so next one is Cathette Film Society and areas A, B, C, and D for a total of $2,000. Director Brander for the recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? Director Elliott, is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Or Director Gisborne, is that a question or you're voting?
Yeah. Looking through, how much funding is coming from each area, I see that they've applied for a grant from the city of $1,500, and the motion before us is having funding coming from the electoral areas. And if it's a 2/3, 1/3 population split, which it roughly is in this community, I think it would make sense to give Cathette Film $750, which is roughly half of the amount that the city has given. So I'll put forward an amendment that the total amount be changed to $750.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Okay, Director McCormick. Okay, so discussion on the $750 amendment.
I think it just makes things a bit more equitable on, our regional community for how the funding is coming from. So I'm comfortable with this amount.
Okay, so I will, seeing no further discussion, I will call the question on the amendment 750 changed from 2,000. All those in favor? Opposed? So that's Director Brander, Director Dowd, and Director Elliott. How did you vote on that?
I'll vote opposed.
Yeah, vote opposed.
Sorry,
okay,
I was trying to read something else at the same time. I apologize.
That's okay. I just want to make sure I catch everyone. So it does not pass. So we have $2,000 back to the main motion. So I will call the question on $2,000 for Director Gisborne.
Yeah, in that case, I'm opposed because if the city is giving $1,500 and the electoral areas are giving $2,000, when we have roughly half the population, I don't see that as really equitable. And I don't want to see the electoral area taxpayers as a cash cow for these kind of events. So I'm opposed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you're welcome. So I will then call the question on this. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Director Gisborne, Director McCormick, it passes. Okay, so on to 9, Logger Sports, which is requesting, where is that? So 2,500 from A, B, C, and D. Is there a motion that someone wants to support? Director Brander?
Move the
recommendation. And then there's a seconder for that.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on this item? Director Gisborne.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. I saw a note in here that said that Logger Sports hasn't requested any funding from the city of Powell River. Is that correct, or do I need to sift through and find the page number?
Mr. Cohenhoven, do you know the answer?
Thank you, through the chair. They have approached the city of Powell River for the rental of the facility. And that's the contribution they're expecting from the city.
Okay.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, I'll just refresh my screen here. So the next item is...
Chair, I'm going to declare a conflict in this one, the Myrtle Point Golf Club.
Okay.
I didn't know you were a golfer.
My daughter works there.
Oh.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a request for 7,500, Director Gisborne.
I'd like to move an alternative motion that the committee recommend to the board that the board approve a grant of $7,500 to Myrtle Point Golf Club from general grant and aid. And if I get a seconder, I'll explain.
Is there a seconder for that? Okay, seeing none, I don't see that. That does not pass. So we're back to the main motion, 7,500 from A, B, and C. Okay, Director Gisborne.
Okay, Myrtle Point Golf Club. There's a bit of history on this one. And if you take a look at the staff report, it describes a bit of the history. In the past, we used to give permissive tax exemption to the Myrtle Point Golf Club because they're a nonprofit. They provide a great, service to the community, and it provides a good community benefit. One of the things that we also did, though, is when we gave them tax exemption, the doors. When we gave them tax exemption, we also expected that they contribute funding to the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department. Because the challenge we have at regional districts when we do,
I just am wondering, do we have a motion on the table?
Yes, I believe the recommendation. Oh, do we have? Oh no, we don't. Sorry, you're right.
No, we don't. Sorry.
Okay, you're right. I thought it was an amendment. So my problem.
In the debate, if we get a motion on the table, but
okay, right. Thank you, Ms. Jones. I totally neglected that. I thought it was an amendment. So we don't have a motion on the table. Would someone like to make a motion, Director Elliott?
I'll second.
I'll motion the one in the package.
Okay, thank you. Okay, carry on, Director.
My apologies and many thanks to Ms. Jones for that catch. So yeah, anyways, the tax exemption was and is an issue with regional districts because our services are siloed. When something like Myrtle Point Golf Course provides a regional benefit, it benefits people in the municipality, it benefits people in this outside the municipality areas A, B, and C. But when it came to a tax exemption, it was, well, why should the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department have to be, picking up the slack? Or why should the planning service be picking up the slack? So as time went on, the board stopped giving the tax exemption to the Myrtle Point Golf Course. One of the workarounds and one of the top ideas was, well, we could just give them a grant from general grant and aid, which would then ensure that the benefit which goes to the region as a whole is also being, coming out of the region as a whole. And one of the things the golf course does is it actually really attracts people to come and live in our community. When they find out that we got a fully serviced golf course, yes, the people on Musketi aren't going to be coming up and using it. Yes, the people on Texada probably aren't going to come over and use it, but it does improve property values, at least on this side. And when that occurs, it lowers the tax burden of everyone. That's kind of it's an attractive facility for our community. But when I look at the motion before us, it comes back to that issue of equity and the issue of why we weren't doing the permissive tax exemption. It's not equitable. Those that benefit aren't the ones that are paying. So if this amount was to come from general grant and aid, I'd support it. But as it is, only areas A, B, and C would be contributing to the Myrtle Point Golf Club. And as a result, I don't find that equitable, and I don't find that to be fair to the electoral area taxpayers that I represent in Area B. And I also don't find it fair to the greater regional taxpayers of the whole region. So I'm actually opposed to this motion, unfortunately, though I do support the Myrtle Point Golf Course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor?
The amendment?
Of the, not the amendment. There's no amendment. So the main motion, it was a bit confusing. So we're on the main motion which was done secondly for $7,500 to Myrtle Pond Golf from A, B, and C. So on the question, all those in favor? That's 1, 2, 3, and opposed? Director Gisborne, it carries. So we can call Director Brander back. Okay, so we're on to the next item, which is Savory Island Land Trust, with the staff recommendation for $5,000 from Area A. Is there someone who'd like to move that? Director Brander, seconded by Director McCormick. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. Yay for Area A. They get some money to them. So on to the next item, which is the Wild Ocean Whale Society, who wants to take care of cats. $4,390 from Area D. Is there a mover or someone want to make a motion related to that? Director McCormick, that's the recommendation? Seconded by Director Gisborne. Okay, so is there any discussion on this item? Director McCormick?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question based on the chart that is on page 13 of this report. And they say under clients served, there are 10,000 clients served. Now we only have 1,100 people on Texada. So I'd like to know, does anyone from staff know how that 10,000 number was arrived at?
Cohenhoven, do you have any enlightenment for us?
Unfortunately, I did not address that with the applicant. That's what they had listed on the form they had submitted. They had also listed the primary geographic region served as the BC coast. So if I were to guess, I would say they're trying to capture the population of the coast.
Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you. Well, the grant is for really a program that they're running on Texada. It's not the whole coast. And we certainly don't have 10,000 people on the island, and it doesn't involve tourists or anyone else. So I would like to propose an amendment, and that is that we approve a grant of $3,000 to the Wild Ocean Whale Society from Area D grant and aid.
Seconded by Director Gisborne. So the amendment on the table, changing 4,390 to 3,000. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? None. Carried. So now we're back to the main motion for $3,000 from Area D for the Wild Ocean Whale Society. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Okay, Texada Land Castle, $3,000 from Area E. Director McCormick, recommendation, seconded by Director Gisborne. So is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Okay, number 14, the Lasqueti Internet Access Society for $1,000. I'll move the recommendation. Someone want to second that? Director McCormick. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Item 15, I will move an alternate recommendation for the link newsletter. I'd like to move recommendation for $2,000. So the same as in the agenda, except with $2,000 from Area E grant and aid for link for their newsletter. Seconded by Director Gisborne. Is there any discussion on that, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because I know Lasqueti Island, we tend to take a lot of money from Lasqueti Island for, things like social planning and general grant and aid. And I'm just wondering if the Lasqueti Island Nature Conservancy and their newsletters and communications project, whether that has a social planning benefit, and maybe that pool of money might be more suitable.
Any further discussion? I'll comment on that, which I agree in some ways, but in other ways, that's all. This application for the newsletter is very similar to the SILT application, the Savory Island Land Trust. So I think the education could be arguable to be more general. It could go out to the whole regional district, but the topics of both SILT and LINK in their newsletters tends to be quite local. So while I appreciate the sentiment, I think it's okay from grant area E. Is there any further, Director Doubt?
Yeah, just a question for staff. Doesn't this amendment make create overspending in the grants and aid for area E?
Well, we haven't gotten to the other grants yet, but let Mr. Coenhoven answer that if we want.
Thank you, through the chair. There is only $6,000 available, and the scenario proposed in the report in front of you did spend the full 6,000. So it would require reducing a contribution or modifying other contributions to make sure we stay on budget.
Which I plan to do. Okay, so any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Doubt's opposed, but it carries. Okay, on the Link Landowner Stewardship Program, I have a motion. I would like to propose an alternate motion and actually put two motions together to request to combine to deal with items 16 and 19 together. And corporate officer has a motion, and I would like to request that project 16 and project 19 be funded from the general grants and aid. And I'll read my motion while it's coming up.
Second.
And that I put them together because I have comments that were apply to both, and I don't want to repeat myself. So the motion is that I want to recommend to the board that the board approve a grant of $10,000, the full amount, to the LCA for their Layered Histories Cultural Heritage Project from general grants and aid, not area E, and that the committee recommend that the board approve a grant of $2,445 to the Lasqueti Island Nature Conservancy for the Landowner Stewardship Program from general grants and aid. And I've got a seconder, so I will make.
Oh, Director Fall, your audio has gone out.
Oh shoot.
Welcome back.
You're back.
Am I back? Okay, thanks. I think I pushed the space key or something. Okay, I have 2 points to make. The first is that these two projects meet a reasonable bar for regional benefit. Our financial assistance policy 3.11 provides little guidance for deciding if a proposal has regional benefit and simply states, quote, projects must involve or benefit a significant segment of the electoral area or region, end quote. I acknowledge and appreciate that our financial staff do their best to identify whether a project meets the bar for a significant regional benefit, or if the benefit is more local to one or more electoral areas. However, the determination of benefit is ultimately political in nature. We have a choice of whether to take a broader or narrower interpretation of regional benefit. A narrow interpretation focuses on direct benefits. However, very few projects can be said to directly benefit everyone in our geographically and socially diverse region. It is more common than not for projects funded under general grants and aid to lack any direct benefit for Lasqueti, which is understandable. It isn't easy for a single project to directly benefit every area. In contrast, a broad interpretation of regional benefit includes indirect benefits, such as generalized benefits of conservation and reconciliation efforts, particularly for projects that develop tools and templates that can be shared and applied elsewhere. We heard at the last Finance Committee meeting, we heard that the Layered History Project aims to produce an accessible, place-based archive that would provide a model for heritage management and community education throughout coastal BC. We have an opportunity to support this leading-edge pilot project to take an important step along the path of reconciliation that would benefit the health and well-being of our entire region. Dr. Lepofsky is an archaeology professor at Simon Fraser University with a proven capacity, has played a significant role in connecting settler communities with First Nations across coastal BC, and has worked extensively with the Tla'amin, who are partners on her Hue'ete archaeology project. This project needs our full support. We also heard that the Link Landowner Stewardship Project aims to create a template for advancing private land conservation across the coastal Douglas Fir zone, and will connect and draw on conservation leadership from around the region. The $2,445 in the motion represents 25% of their proposed budget. I'm asking for support to accept that these two projects have regional benefit. The second point relates to fairness and equity for the Lesquity community. By my estimates, since 2011, Lesquity has contributed over $22,800 to general grants and aid. As far as I am aware, no projects from a Lesquity proponent have been supported from general grants and aid over that time frame. Perhaps more importantly, I am also not aware of any project funded via general grants and aid that has had a significant direct benefit to Lesquity. We need to decide whether we take a broad or narrow view of regional benefit. I prefer a broad interpretation that fits the spirit of working together to leverage the most benefit across the entire region. In this view, these two projects should be considered for funding under general grants and aid. If instead we prefer a narrow view of regional benefit and do not feel that these projects meet that bar, then it is hard for me to imagine any project from a Lesquity proponent ever receiving funding from general grants and aid. In this case, a spirit of equity and fairness would allow Lesquity to instead direct its scarce tax dollars to its local grants and aid, whereby projects like the two on the table could be funded periodically. Thank you, and I hope this resolution receives support. Okay, is there any further discussion after my long, Dr. Brander?
Thanks, Chair. I guess I have one question through the chair to the chair, but we have, you're suggesting we go for $10,000, but it looks like in the application that they're actually just anticipating $6,000 from the QRD, and that they have an additional $4,000 coming from the HCT.
No, so to clarify, the Link Landowner Stewardship Program requested $6,000, but the motion has $2,445 from item 16 instead of 6,000, because that's 25% of their project, about 9,000 something. The 10,000 is for the Lesquity community, is number 19, the LCA Layered Heritage Project, which Professor Lepofsky presented last week, or at the last meeting, and they're requesting $10,000 through the LCA for that project, which is really only viable with $10,000. It's not viable with $1,000.
Okay, thank you. My apologies.
That's okay. Director Dowd, I believe your hand was raised.
It was. Yeah, and I think we need to, when we're deciding that we're going to shift between different piles of money, different grant services, I think we need to talk about it, particularly if we're talking about fairness between everybody. We need to talk about whether or not the directors on the board would approve an archaeological study within the city of Powell River from the Grants and Aid Service. I don't think that would happen, frankly, and I don't know why it should happen for Lesquity. We can look at every grant application and saying that somehow contributes to the general good. I think we can do that, and to do that fairly, we're going to have to look at every grant application, including, should it happen that some organization within the city should decide that they want grant funding to do an archaeological study, if they're going to come to the regional district and ask for grant and aid funds to do that was of interest to their group within the city, not necessarily the municipality itself, but their group, be it a heritage society or another interested group, come and apply to the Grants and Aid Service to do that. I think we have to be careful when we're deciding what is in the greater good. That's all I'm going to say. Is I understand the desire to seek it from a different pool of funds, and discussing what is for the greater good and what is all in the idea of fairness is going to be an interesting procedure every time.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but then Director Dowd spoke up, and now my mind is shifting. So thank you, Director Dowd. When I think about heritage sites in the electoral areas, not including Lesquity, it makes me think about the planning service, because that's kind of something that we take into account over in planning. And, from what Director Dowd's discussing about something that would take place in the city, if it was to happen in Area B or Area C and there was a heritage site, it would seem more in line with the planning service. But Skeety Island's not part of the planning service. They've got Islands Trust and they've got a separate kind of service for that. So this is where I think the board has to balance our priorities of how much of this benefit is regional in nature and how much of this benefit is, more akin to something that would occur within the city of Powell River or would occur within the planning service. So I think it does provide some level of regional benefit, but would 25% of the project be considered a regional benefit? So, yeah, I'm undecided at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, Director Elliott, and then I'll speak again.
So I think the benefits for reconciliation are regional, definitely. The benefits for a model that can be applied elsewhere would kind of depend on whether the proprietary nature of things would allow for that. And generally speaking, in the area of traditional knowledge, that the access to that is usually pretty restricted and of limited use to folks outside of a general region. So I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. If it's a model that could be applied elsewhere province-wide, then that isn't specifically our region, but rather investing in something that might benefit the entire province. So while I do buy the idea that reconciliation is good for the entire region, that I don't see it benefiting the rest of the region as much as it does the area of Lasqueti for actual land planning purposes. The answer right now is it's I don't know right now how I feel about it. Some time to think about it would be a great for me. And I know that these are not decisions, but that just recommendations that go forward to the board and that we get to think about it further before voting at the other end. But I guess a question for staff would be, how does this request fit with the actual fund that we're talking about? And where does it leave it if we're going forward with all the current recommendations? So that's a technical question. Where would this leave us on that fund?
Mr. Cohenhoven?
Through the chair, may I ask for clarification? Are you speaking about the dollars? How many dollars does it leave us with in the fund, or about the is it in alignment with the purpose of the fund?
Wow, I'd like to actually know both of those questions. So thank you.
Okay. I do have a running tally of the funds available. If I may share my screen real quick. And so this is just a tally of where we've come. In green, you can see the items we've decided, and the items in yellow are the ones that we're currently talking about moving into the general fund. So just looking at what we've allocated, there is sufficient room to do this on a purely dollars and cents basis. The position of the fund is quite healthy. There's about $60,000 remaining if we continue doing this.
Does that include the motion that was not made or deferred, like the amount recommended by staff in the first one that we never managed to address?
The rug is blank.
That is correct. I believe there's no motion for funding made on ORUG, so currently that's a $0 allocation.
Okay, so I would need to include that separately if I thought that was probably going to pass at the next level?
Yes, I think keeping that holistic approach about everything, all of these requests and what may change, ultimately we do need to fall into these budgets by the time everything is voted on and done.
And while you got that up there, Mr. Cohenhoven, I'll just point out that 60,000 at the bottom includes the motion on the table.
That is
That would be
correct.
what would be left if this passed. Then there would be 60,000 left, sufficient to meet the full request of ORUC, if that's what the board desires.
Thank you. That is the information. And then we're gonna speak to the whether it fits the criteria.
Yeah. Let's stop sharing here. And as far as the nature of the grants and aid pot of grant funding available, we're governed by the Local Government Act, Section 380. And effectively what it's telling us is that these initiatives and organizations that we're providing support to, we have the choice of choosing the specific areas that they benefit, choosing the electoral areas like A, B, C, D, E, city, or taking that broader view and saying, as was previously mentioned, this does have an overall positive impact for our region, regardless of which specific area that it's occurring in. And the legislation lets us a little bit of freedom here to interpret that narrowly or broadly. And so in this case, if we can make a case that these initiatives have a regional benefit, it does fit within the scope and the nature of what the grants and aid general pot of money is supposed to do. So I guess to summarize that, we do have sufficient funds available, and this is a possibility under legislation.
Thank you. And then my last point is I really need to go to the bathroom. So.
Okay. Well, maybe we can try to finish this one. Or do you need to take a break right away?
Fairly soon.
Fairly soon. Hopefully, if I'll talk and if we have more discussion, I'll pause this one midway. But I just have one comment to make, which is to clarify a bit of a misconception. I really suggest between now and the board meeting, whether this passes or not, for the committee to go and read the application. The application is not for an archaeological project. It's for a layered history project. It's for a living archive to create a model that can be used as a model for other Indigenous and settler communities throughout the region. This is from the report itself, which is on page 678 out of 784. Our project will serve as a model for Indigenous heritage conservation throughout the Salish Sea. It will contribute directly to, one, counteracting erasure of Indigenous history by providing a fuller understanding of the ecological landscape within which Indigenous population interacted, helping people understand the layered history of the island, creating a living digital archive that can be developed over time as we continue to document deeper time and more recent history of the islands, creating a model for other Indigenous and settlers communities throughout the region to respect and of how to respectfully and fully document deep time and recent history, and creating mutual respect for heritage as a way forward. I would propose this is an opportunity we don't want to miss, and I look forward to support, because Professor Lepofsky won't be doing this forever. This is an opportunity for us to do something that I don't know anyone else who might be able to do such a project. She's done extensive work on the coast, archaeology and cultural history work. She's developed many contacts with First Nations. There's been several, I've reported at the board meetings on several reconciliation events on Lesquiti, primarily facilitated by Professor Lepofsky, that have brought people from Tla'amin have come down to Lesquiti 3 times for a plaque ceremony at Squiddy Bay, for a midden walk or hike on one of the midden sites, and for this cultural ancestral ceremony. She's also brought over representatives from Qualicum, from Comox, from many other First Nations. So this is not an archaeological project. This is a layered history project, and it's not about a particular place. The archive will be for Lesquiti and about the history of Lesquiti, but it will provide a model that can be transformed and applied elsewhere in the regional district. And hence, I believe it actually has I would argue it has more of a regional benefit than almost any of the other regional projects we funded under regional grants and aid. Okay, I'll leave that. Director Gisborne.
Thank you. And sorry, I had to jump out to the little boys' room in the middle of that. I couldn't hold it. Yeah, there's only so much money in general grant and aid. There is a funding disparity between electoral area E and the rest of the region that's gone on for many, many years. However, we have set the budget for general grant and aid, and we're already seeing that we have a very high ask this year. I don't suppose Lasqueti is going to wait for another year to get access to the funding, but this is a big financial jump and a big ask for general grant and aid. And if it's going to kind of reconcile over a decade of lack of funding for Lasqueti, I think when we adopt the budget and we set our general grant and aid limit, that we should have taken that into account, that we were going to play a little bit of catch up. To me, it is an opportunity, but it's also a very high amount from general grant and aid. Does it have a social planning benefit? I think it does. So, yeah, if this motion doesn't pass, I think that there is still other funding avenues to support Lasqueti Island in this initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the motions, the two-part motion in front of us? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? 4 in favor, opposed? Director Dowd and Director Gisborne, it passes. Thank you very much. Moving on, and I note the time, so we've got a couple more items. Let me bring up our agenda. Where are we? Okay, so more for Lasqueti Island, and I think they'll be quick now. So the Lasqueti Arts Council, item 17, they request $2,500. Staff, I'd like to move an alternate recommendation of $2,000 from the Lasqueti Arts Council. So changing the recommendation from 1,000 to 2,000. So seconder, would someone like to second that? Director Brander. I'll just mention that it's because they have rarely asked us for money. They have asked for money in the past. They have a good project related to the cemetery. I think it would be nice to support them a bit higher, but we can't afford the full amount. Director Gisborne?
My agenda says $1,000.
I just moved 2,000.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd said the agenda said something. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, that's okay. I moved 2,000 an alternate. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, none carried. The False Bay Parent Advisory Committee, or Council 18, I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Is any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, none carried. Number 20, Texada Art, Culture and Tourism, $12,000 request from Economic Development.
Chair, I must declare a conflict. I hope to participate in their art tour this year, so I will step out for the debate on this.
Okay.
We're going to move Director McCormick into the waiting
Okay, we'll find her again in a moment.
And then we'll admit her right after. Just give me 1 second, please. I have to find her. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is for 12,000 from Economic Development Service. It's the only one we have from that. Director Brander.
Remove the recommendation.
Second.
Gisborne, second. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, none carried. Okay, we can have Ms. Director McCormick return.
5. Director McCormick is back in the session.
Okay. Thank you. So our number 21 is the following. The remaining items are all from social planning. So 21 is for Lift Community Resource Center, request $50,000 and a recommendation of $50,000. What's the will of the committee? Director Dowd?
I'll make the motion for number 21.
Number 21, 50,000. Is there a seconder for that? Director Elliott, is there any discussion on this? Director Gisborne?
Thank you. The social planning service, or the social planning grant is paid for from the electoral areas only. Areas A, B, C, D, and E. LIFT is requesting a grant of $50,000. In the staff report, per the application, LIFT is not seeking funding from the city of Powell River. So what I'm seeing is LIFT is not asking the city of Powell River for money for their CRC, but they're asking the electoral areas only for $50,000. And that makes it hard for me to support. That's the first one. Second issue is we heard, what was it, last month? Tourism Powell River said that they were having to increase their costs to deal with the CRC center being next door to them. So that's costing the taxpayers as well. So I'm not in support. I don't want to spend $50,000 when the city's not spending $50,000 and that we're already having to pay funding to improve the issues that are going on in that neighborhood, especially in relation to Tourism Powell River. So I'm actually going to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick, and then
Thank
Director
you.
Dowd.
And I also have some concerns sitting on the Tourism Powell River Board. The staff of Tourism Powell River have told the board that they've had numerous instances of needles being found at the front of their premises and other sort of inappropriate stuff left, on their site. So I'm kind of concerned that LIFT is not looking after the neighborhood disorder that's resulting from the location that they're in. So I also have some concerns about this. Thanks.
Okay, Director Dowd, and then Director Elliott.
I'm going to point out that this is a specific request from LIFT for support to the Community Resource Center, which provides services to everybody who walks in the door, who is a resident of the regional district. Isn't limited to the city. There's a number of important services to people who are on social margins of our society. I think it's important, and I think it's reasonable that the regional district commit to funding this through the social planning service, which is what the social planning service is about.
Okay, Director Elliott, and then Director Brander.
Thank you, Director Fall, Chair. So this isn't for all of LIFT's services. It's not for the shelter. It's not for the supportive housing. It's not for the provincially delivered services that they do by contract. This is specifically for the Community Resource Center, which provides some meals and a service hub for people looking for help. When they referred to the city not supporting them, it was because they rolled their application for permissive tax exemptions across all of their building services and so forth, and could not support the financial need. It wasn't for this particular service because they didn't apply separately from the overall organization of LIFT. So I just wanted to point out there wasn't a decision by the city to not support this particular service. It was a decision by our CFO that the LIFT organization had not adequately made their case that they were needing help with their taxes on all of their facilities, the bulk of which were delivering provincially funded services, which this one is not. So I wouldn't put too much into saying the city did or didn't. And the grant application before us is about supporting services for everybody in the region to have a community resource center. And I seem to recall that they provide a lot of meals and food as well. Thank you.
Yeah, Director Brender.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate all the comments that have been made to this point. I do value what the CRC offers to the community and helping out the marginalized population. But I'm looking at it just strictly from a dollar point of view. And I invite anybody to tell me if I've read this wrong or if I'm reading this wrong. But I see they have excess revenues over expenses last year of $110,000. And it appears to me they have reserves of very significant reserves of $1.7 million. I guess I'm more inclined to be spending the money where it could be better used. If Lyft gets to a point where they are in a tight situation where it is actually at a risk that they may not be able to offer this service anymore, then I'd be more than happy to step up to the plate. But as I see it, I think they have the money there right now. So I'm not so inclined to support this motion.
Director Gisborne, second round.
Thank you, Chair. Second round, and should be my final one. Oh no, wait, sorry. Yeah, I concur with Director Doubt. This, Lyft and the CRC provides a regional benefit. It benefits those in the city and those outside the city. I completely agree. So why should only the people outside the city pay? If Director Doubt would like to put forward an amendment that it comes from general grant and aid and therefore everyone pays, I would support that in principle. The second one is taking a look at the application before us on page 308 of 383, secured funds, Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, $110,000. So they do receive provincial funding. And they're coming to the regional district asking for $50,000 from the electoral areas only. So I don't think it's fair or equitable for 1/3 of the population to be paying $50,000 when the other 2/3 of the municipal taxpayers aren't paying. So on those points, I'm opposed. That's before I even get into, how much money they already have on the books and how much money they have in reserves. My stance is if it provides a regional benefit and people around this table have agreed that it provides a regional benefit, then the region should pay, not just the electoral areas. We're not just a piggy bank with excess money. That's my stance on it. So I'm opposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I be opposed as well. While I accept that, they do help people from the region. I know there's people from Texada who've used their services, but I'm really concerned about the disorder that this facility has created for the neighborhood, and that they agreed to minimize that disorder and keep it from affecting other people. And in fact, that hasn't happened. So yeah, I just can't support it. So thanks.
Thank you. I think we've gone around enough. Is there any further debate? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion, Director Doubt, Director Elliott, all those opposed, Director Brander, Director Gisborne, Director McCormick, it does not pass. Okay. 22, Cathette Community Justice asking for $2,000, staff recommendation $2,000 from social planning, Director Brander, Director McCormick. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, none carried. Everybody deserves a smile, EDAS. Enough to bring a tear to your eye. So $2,500 recommendation, Director Brander.
So moved.
Seconder. I'll second it. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? It passes. Cathette Pride, the recommendation is for $3,200 from social planning.
Moved.
Director Brander, moved. Is there a seconder? I'll second that. Director McCormick seconds it, sorry. And is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None. Oh, none opposed. That's good. And life cycle housing, a recommendation for 10,000 from social planning.
I'll move it.
Moved. Is there a seconder for that? I'll second it. Any discussion on this item? Director Brander?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was a little bit hesitant on this one because you can look at it two ways. You can say it's serving quite a small populace because there's not that many people that live in these cabins. But if you look at life cycle as a whole, they do serve quite a few people. I don't see this as being a continuing ask. I see it more as a one-time thing because they need to do some renovations. So it's going to be applied to a very specific project. So in that view, I can support it, especially as we are obviously in need of housing in the area.
Okay, is there any other discussion, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, taking a look at their application, I don't see they've had any requests since 2018 and all the way up to 2022. So they haven't asked us for money before. They need a bit of money to try and renovate the property and provide the housing that they're already working on. So this is the kind of thing I think grants and aids are for. Like, yes, we do provide grants to kind of keep people going and certain organizations going, but this is I like us to have a bit of a pool so that when a good organization comes forward and says, hey, we need your help just for this year, we have some money to help them out. So yeah, I don't expect that we'll be seeing grant applications from them in the future. So yeah, I'm happy to support it, even though it provides a regional benefit and it's only the electoral areas paying. I'll still support it. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Any further debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, we have two more items on our agenda. That's the grants and aid. Thankfully, we've got through it. We have an option. Either we can move into it. I'll give a moment for anyone from the board, if the committee, if you prefer to refer this, and I'm not sure the exact motion, but one suggestion is that we refer this to the committee of the whole meeting, take a bit of a break and deal with it in the committee of the whole meeting.
I move that it goes to committee of the whole.
Okay, and seconded by Director Dowd. Is that
I don't
certainty of the rate?
I think Director Dowd had his hand up to ask a question.
Oh, sorry, Director Dowd.
My estimation was that we could probably deal with these in a very short period of time. I'd like to see us give a go at trying to do them on the agenda that's published and see if it takes any time, because I don't see a lot of disagreement. I think we've talked about them before.
Then I withdraw my friendly amendment.
Okay, let's just carry on and see if we can do this quickly. So item 8.7 is a recommendation for Tetra Tech for landside hazard assessment study. Director Dowd.
I move the motion in the package under 8.7.
Seconded by Director Brander. Is there any discussion on this? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'm just curious, which service will be paying for this? Because it talks about, official community plan, and I'm just wondering, is this a planning service issue or is this emergency services? I'm just wondering, because we spent a lot of time talking about which pools we take money from, and I'm just curious which pool this one's coming from.
See, Ms. Rodden has joined us, Manager of Planning Services. She might help us with that.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, in the report under financial impact, it identifies that the funding for the project is through the planning service.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
Well, in that case, I think it would be appropriate this item be dealt with at the planning committee, which handles the planning service. So I would like to move that this matter be forwarded to the planning committee.
I see Ms. Corporate Officer or Acting CAO with her hand up, so maybe she has some clarification on.
Yeah, so we did examine both of these two items for where they could sit. Essentially, that could be administration and operation of the planning service. However, this is also impacted by the delegation of authority bylaw that so the board needs to decide to sing a direct award, and it's directing to enter into a contract. So it's going to require input from all board members.
All right. So you still want to try to make your motion, Director Gisborne?
Well, I think I do, if not for the reason that the director of Area A is not present, and this has to do with his area.
Well, that's fine. So we would need a seconder. Director Elliott, are you seconding that?
I had a question.
Oh, you had a question. Okay. So first let's see if we have a seconder for the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll go to the question. So Director Elliott, you have a question?
So my question was around, if it went to planning, that means it'd have to be delayed for an entire month because planning has happened already this month. And whether this particular contract has a timing window.
It's a moot point.
I know that's what I was, anyway, he asked me to ask my question. My question was in regards to whether I wanted to second that or not.
Oh, okay, sorry. So do you want to second that then?
I don't know. It would depend on the answer. That I don't know if there's time constraints or whether taking another look at this and bringing it back to finance later is a good idea. Generally speaking, I think that's a really long delay, and probably they have it on this agenda because they want to move it forward. Anyway,
Ms. Rodden, do you have information on the timing issue?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, this is a precursor to the Savory Island Official Community Plan Review and Update, which is scheduled to start in September. And this is an important background study for that project. The project is in the work plan and the budget. It's just simply under the Delegation of Purchasing Authority bylaw number 454. Projects over $10,000 must be approved by the board prior to moving forward. So from my perspective, it is time sensitive. I'd like to get it started. The consultant has said they could complete it by the end of August.
Thank you. So is there so we still have a motion. So I see your hand, Director Gisborne, but we need to determine whether there's a seconder. Director McCormick?
I'll second, yeah.
Okay, so now we have a seconded motion to refer this to the planning committee. Is that debatable? I can't remember. But I guess it is. Yeah, so Director Gisborne and then Director Dowd.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to say, because Director Elliott was asking questions about, the time sensitivity of postponing it, that under Robert's rules, that if you speak to a motion that has been moved, then she is automatically the seconder. So I just wanted to clarify that up. Since it is time sensitive, I am kind of a bit more hesitant now to actually support it going to the planning committee. But then again, I do know that OCPs are not something that are done quickly. I think it could go either way, because even if we do pass this motion, it still has to go before the board. And hopefully Jason Lennox or Director Lennox is back by then, and we can get his input, which I'm sure will be supportive. So my kind of hookups or hangups is that this is really a planning committee kind of issue. And I really like seeing these things in planning committee, because our finance committee agenda, I think, is big enough as it is, and we had a bit of extra time this morning. So, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. You had your hand.
We can expand our agendas and our meetings to pick up as much time as anybody wants. We did a sea level rise study that indicated that we should do a complete a landscape hazard society assessment for Savory Island, because sea level rise is likely to cause landslide activity and everything. That's been identified. We all received a report. We all know what it is. This could simply be moved to our board meeting for approval. We could get on with it, and it would allow us to continue with the OCP in a reasonable time frame. I don't see any reason to delay it. We might as well go ahead and say we'd like to spend that $20,000, and we can approve that when we have our board meeting. I don't see the point in delaying it for yet another month. We have another planning committee meeting. I'm against the amendment.
Okay, corporate officer, acting CAO.
Just if I can, it does make sense for the people who will vote at it at the board meeting, and that would be the whole board to discuss whether they want to, because that is what is that's how we decide where to put things, is based on who has to vote on it at the board level. So it would make sense for everybody to see this at this meeting, or at a committee of the whole. We did consider that as well.
Okay. I just want to say that I'm actually opposed to postponing it now. So
okay, so let's dispense with this, and we will call the question, which was to refer to it to the planning committee, or postpone it to the planning committee. I can't remember the exact wording, but the idea is to send it to the planning. Any further debate? We'll call the question. All those in favor of sending it to planning committee? Seeing none. All those opposed? Everyone's opposed. Hopefully I don't need to list everyone. All opposed. Okay, back to the main motion. Is there any further debate on the main motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, one more item to go, which is the service contract for the updated housing needs assessment for electoral areas A, B, C, and D. What's the board's wish, the committee's wish? Does anyone want to move something? Director Brander? Recommendation, is there a seconder for that? Director McCormick, discussion on this. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I read the report. I read the previous housing needs assessment. We're in a housing crisis. I think everyone knows that we're in a housing crisis. We have a very high housing needs. This has to do with areas A, B, C, and D. I was talking to a friend just the other day, and I said, yeah, we're looking at updating the housing needs assessment. And they quipped back with, well, how many building permits did you issue since your last housing needs assessment? And well, I think they were being a little cheeky because we don't issue building permits. So we don't really know, how many new houses are being built in the electoral areas. What we do know is that we do need more housing, and we need to, balance our housing needs. So the way I see it is, the motion before us is that we contract Patricia Maloney for $12,500, essentially to tell us something that everyone already knows, that we are in a serious housing crisis. So I'm actually opposed to this motion because I think we still have lots of work to do with our OCPs and a lot of work to do in our communities to work on housing. And I think, the housing crisis on the West Coast is known not just across our region, but across the continent. And you hear about it worldwide. I don't think we need another housing needs assessment at this time. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Is there any further debate on this, Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you. And I support this. I think we already agreed that we would update the housing needs assessment. So now this is coming back to us as we had asked that it would. I would just ask that the consultant touch base with the Chicksada Island Seniors Nonprofit Housing Society, because they have recently done a housing needs assessment for seniors on Chicksada. So that might save the consultant a lot of work by touching base with them on the information that they have gleaned from their study. So that's it.
Good, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation and opposed? Director Gisborne's opposed. It carries. So that brings us to the end. There's no new business. Question period. Is there anyone in the room, the reporter or anyone else wishing to ask questions?
Hello, Chair Galinsky from the Peak here.
Hi, go ahead.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I know we're on a long agenda here. I just want to confirm with item 8.6.1, which is the Outdoor Recreation Users Group. As I understand it, there's no recommendation to go forward to the board. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. I don't know what the next step is with that, but this committee meeting, we did not make any recommendations.
I thank you, Chair, for that clarification. Also, with regard to the grants that were given out at the special meeting, Finance Committee meeting last month, I had asked the Manager of Financial Services for what the ask was for in total for the grants, and she indicated to me that that would be available at this meeting, and so I'm hoping that the Manager of Financial Services through the Chair can report on that.
Ms. Greenan, you can maybe point Mr. Galinsky to the right place.
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. I would actually like to direct that question to our Assistant Manager of Financial Services.
Mr. Cohenhoven, maybe you can find it for us.
Thank you, through the chair. The total requests, we had 25 requests, and we had total requests of $261,000. Sorry, $261,130.
I thank the assistant manager for that. And what was the amount available for grants again? I know it was mentioned at the meeting, but I've forgotten what that was.
Yeah, the amount available for this intake that we discussed today, $291,479.
Thank you very much, Chair. Those were my questions.
Okay, you're welcome. And that's Mr. Galinsky on page 8 of 383 of the grants and aid report. There's a table which shows the different services and the amount available by funding source.
Thanks for pointing that out, Chair. I appreciate it.
Okay, any further questions? I don't think there's anyone else in the room. It'd be amazing if someone sat through 3.5 hours with us, but I think we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
So before we start our next meeting, staff will just need a quick 10-minute break, maybe 5 minutes. Is that okay with everybody?
So will some of the directors.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
how about we
I need to go have a 10-minute nap.